cool. But it's really great to see all of you here. We appreciate you taking the time to come from all over the place for our annual FAA Division Airport CIP Workshop. How many of you have never been to one of these before? A lot of you. That's pretty cool. So this was an event that we started about 5 years ago. We're not going to spend any time talking about the past, but there was a time when we had run out of money. And one of the things we did when we ran out of money is we didn't do a good job of communicating to people about what we were up to and what was happening. So this was really an event that we put together to try to make sure we do a better job as a division in our partnership with the FAA to communicate what we're up to, what we're investing in, where our resources are, and how we're doing financially, and everything else related to the division and the FAA. So we appreciate y'all taking the time to come. I'm Dave Elaine. I'm the director of the CDOT Division of Aeronautics. And before I introduce Mark and his team, I'd like to introduce our team at the division. So if y'all would stand up and introduce yourself. I'll start with Caitlin up front there.
Caitlin Westendorf, planner for the southeastern part of the state. I have Leadville, south to New Mexico, and east to Kansas.
I guess I'm Sean. You'll be watching me all day up here, running the cameras. I'm the communications manager for the division.
I'm Kim McLean. I'm the planner for the Northeast region. I have Granby, Kremlin, Centennial, and everything east of that.
Patrick Heaton, student intern with the division, senior at Metro State.
Bryce Shuck, I'm the business manager for the division.
Todd Green, I'm the program manager for the division. Also, Scott Story is an aviation planner as well. He was not feeling well today. I talked to him this morning, and by the sounds of it, no one wants him here. So we apologize for not making it. But.
And some of you may have met Tanya Hill as our accounting and admin administrator. She's the friendly face you meet when you come in our office. She's over at our place today keeping the lights on for us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark to introduce him and his team.
Good morning. For those of you that don't know, I'm Mark Miller. I'm the assistant manager with the FAA Airports office. We work in close partnership with Dave and his folks. We administer the airport improvement program. We couldn't make it easy, so we split up the state a little bit differently than CDOT, but similar roles and responsibilities. Here today with us we have Ron Niehoff. Ron is the project manager for the southern third of the state. In the center is Kristen Bronson. She was unable to make it here today, but she represents basically the I-70 swath, more or less, for the state, and is the state engineer for us. And then on the northern third, we have Mike Motz. And Mike's in the back of the room there. You guys will get to know Mike real well because outside of just being a new engineer for us, who's crossed his 1 year threshold, so he's officially a part of the team. Mike also, with his 1 year experience, volunteered to help learn compliance. So he and I will be working on compliance through a transition plan. And then I'm sure most of you have worked with him in the past. John Sweeney is in the back of the room. John is, going forward, he will be the Colorado planner for you all. In years past, you had worked with Linda Bruce. It's probably about June this year. She was doing part-time, but in June, she accepted a position to become a full-time Part 139 certification inspector. So she's still working within our region. Her office is up in Seattle, but she's going to be located here in our office here in Denver the whole time. So it's kind of a good opportunity for us that, as somebody who knows our airports very well, now we'll be able to add an additional twist on it from the certification side. So. We are currently out for a selection, for a replacement for a planner for Linda. That planner will probably be assuming the roles in Utah at that point. We're also looking to go out here. It's not out on the street yet, but we're also down 2 vacancies from the engineering side of the house. So just over the next year, you'll probably see a couple more new faces joining our group here shortly.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. We really value our partnership with the FAA. Our division, I think, works probably closer with the FAA than any of our counterparts in the country, I would say. Todd's nodding his head. We work with a lot of other states that we interact with, so we really appreciate our partnership with you guys and everything you do. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. So I think what we'd like to do real quickly is just go around the room so everybody can get to know everybody a little bit. Just say who you are and where you're from. I think that would be great. Kevin, I'll start with you if that's cool.
Sure. Kevin Booth, I'm the airport director at the Yankton Regional Airport.
Phil Dornicamp, Perry Stokes, Trinidad.
Jesse Fabula with Armstrong Consultants. Tony McCary, Director of Aviation at the Durango La Plata County Airport.
Oren Fallon, the Operations Manager at Durango.
I'm Josh Schroeder. I'm the airport supervisor for Grand County Airports.
Wesley Brand, so I'm the airport manager for Fremont County.
Julie Thiessen, I'm with Armstrong Consultants.
Christy Wilson, I work for Jacobs.
Jeff Campbell with Jacobs.
Lori Hinton with Centennial Airport.
Mike Chronicle with Centennial Airport, and I sit on the board for CDO.
Ryan Rasmussen with Meeting Hunt.
Brian Hayes with me.
Martin Montoya, City of Martin.
Jeff Palacios, Aviation.
I'm Gilbert, Aviation.
Jacob Heiner, Meeting Hunt.
Brett Cottrell, Leadville Airport.
Tom Blickenster for Grants Manager, Denver International Airport.
Jolly West, Civil West Airport. Lynn Legree, West Cliff.
Tyler Purvis, City of Brush.
You've already been introduced.
Dave Dafey, Dell.
Justin Hyde, Shell. Brandon Burns, Rocky Mountain Metro.
Casey Adamson, Civil Engineering.
Adrian Ramirez, Business Manager, Greeley Wells County.
Tyler Sipes, Airport Operations, Colorado County Airport.
Andrew Scott, City of Steamboat Springs.
Ethan Dunkel, Recondo.
Morning, Ryan Toner with Civil Engineering.
John Sasser.
Charlie McDermott with Dibble Engineering.
Greg Allen, Ray Airport. Jay Coburn, Civil Engineering. Greg Pedrosa, I'm the interim director for Pueblo Airport.
Brett Holt with Albert Finish.
John Rostas, Armstrong.
Charlie May, Sterling Municipal.
Jessica Chandler, Ops Officer at SLU Region.
Dave Elliott, Meadow Lake.
Stacy Fan, Airport Manager, Steamboat. Senator Beatty, for the Finance Director at Grand Junction.
Eric Trinquad and Grand Junction. Gary Eastman with Mountain Finish. Pete Manning with West Nation. Steve Glenmeyer, Fort Morgan Municipal.
Orlando Gilbert with RSH.
Kara Alice with RSH. Julie Barrow, RSH.
Kenny Nampa, the Telluride Regional Airport.
Mike Moss, the FAA.
John Sweeney with FAA.
Zach Bout, airport manager, Salida.
Rick Danforth, Denison.
Dave Ripple, Colorado Air Spaceport, and I'm also on the board for CAOA as well.
Bob Lamar, Colorado Air Spaceport.
We get everybody? Cool. Help me thank Dave and his team for letting us use this room and helping us with lunch today. We couldn't do it without our partnership. Awesome. I'd also like to point out that Mr. Mampa back there from the Telluride Regional Airport is also one of our aeronautical board members. I think most of you are familiar with our division. Operates under the direction of a 7-member aeronautical board. We have 2 members from the Western Slope. Kenny serves in one of those positions. 2 members from the Eastern Plains. 1 from the airport community. 1 from the pilot community, and then 1 at large. So right now we are seeking 2 people to be interested in 2 vacancies that will be coming up in December, 1 from the Western Slope, 1 from the East, roughly delineated by the Continental Divide. So if any of you know anybody in your local community that might be interested in serving on our aeronautical board and helping us do all the cool things we do, let me know and I'll get you the information on how you can apply. So with that, I think I'll, yes ma'am?
26 airports, 9 consultants.
26 airports, 9 consultant firms here today. So cool, thank you for that. If you didn't sign in when you got here, if you would, when you leave, that would be cool. That would keep track of how many folks we do. So thank you, Caitlin, for that. So with that, I think we'll kick off. I'm going to turn it over to Bryce Shuck, our business manager, and give you all an update on what we're up to financially and prove to you that we actually have money.
All right, thank you, everyone. It's every year gets a little better to be up here because the numbers look a little better than they did when I started 4 years ago. So, started off, and you'll be familiar with these slides if you've been to any of our board meetings or follow our board meetings online with the streams that Sean puts up. or simply check the website for the data. But I'll just quickly run through these. If you have any questions, happy to do them with the group or afterwards here. The first slide we show every month is simply our cash balance. Our fund at the end of September was at $13.5 million, but a little over $1 million from the year before, or the month before, sorry. That growth you see there, pretty consistent. That's not going to grow into perpetuity. We're looking to reinvest those monies back into Colorado, which Todd and his team will talk about later. That's probably going to start flatlining a little bit here as we start catching up on some payments and some larger drawdowns from our current program that's out there. So cash balance overall very healthy. We haven't seen anything abnormal with our cash balance that we haven't projected for the last few years. So nothing out of the ordinary there, and good news for us and for all of you. The next slide we look at is simply our revenue projection for the year. September, our division revenue was $3.6 million. For the year, we budgeted for $34.5 million in revenue. Current trend showing about 33.2, so about 3% shy. Again, as you can see there, the green line is the actuals, the pink line is the progression. Things are healthy. We're getting the revenue we expect to, and again, no surprises, which is always nice. Next slide, again, just highlights the tax revenue. As you all well know, the tax follows the month that it happens. So we get the revenue. September just happened. We'll get that revenue in October. You guys will get that payment out in November. So that's the delay in the line there. The orange line showing what we kick back to the airports is always a month behind, but the trend lines stay in place. There's been no unexpected adjustments, particularly from Denver International, which is the biggest effect on our budget. So nothing out of the ordinary there. You'll hear me keep saying this, but things are moving as we expected them to, which is good news. Our contingency slide here, for those of you that aren't familiar with that, our contingency model that we implemented a couple of years ago, when we came out of debt, when we started to look at, okay, when can we start ramping up our programs? This is designed to make sure that when we're here telling you today that, hey, for 2020, this is the number our grant program will be. In 2021, as we start planning internally, here's what we're looking at. This slide is developed, the contingency model is developed to make sure we have the financial resources to cover those commitments. Crazy concept, I know, but I know some of you have lived through the negative of that. Essentially what this is telling us here, the program that Todd and his team are going to talk about today, we've got the funds in place to do that grant program. And as we look forward to next year, and you'll notice on that yellow line, there's a slight increase on that we're currently projecting. Based on what we have now and what we are projecting for the future, we have no problem covering those costs as well. We are actually already at that point. And our contingency model, for your information, it runs with the next year. Everything's going to go to forecast. The way the taxes are structured, we have a 2-3 month lag between today. If things crash, we wouldn't see any change really for 2 months. So what this means here is after that, we projected at a worst case scenario, which is kind of what we had seen previously. So even if that worst case hits, we have the program in place for this year and for next year, what we're planning to do right now. What that means to you, you're not going to get a call saying that, hey, we've got to change stuff. We've got these programs developed, we've got the funds on hand, and the plan to have those there. So good news when those are looking where they're at. Next slide is showing the fuel flow at Denver International. Why Denver? That's 80 to 85% of our revenue, which means that's 80 to 85% of what you're getting back from the airport. As far as the grant program is concerned. So as you can see, we're tracking really 3 years history here, and the trend lines are remarkably similar for the most part. And you can also see that with that green line, which is this year, they've set records every single month this year for flowage at Denver, which again leads to more revenue for us. It leads to more money we can put into the system. Nothing else to highlight there. I mean, year over year, they saw a little over 6% increase to the fuel flowage. With more gates and expansion planning and coming, that bodes well for the health of the system, of the division, and of aviation throughout Colorado. And the final one to look at is just our admin budget. Not a lot of care to all of you, but as taxpayers, it is important to know that we are statutorily limited to spend 5% of our revenue on admin expenses. That is that gray line at the top. You'll see we actually budgeted a lot less than that in blue. And then finally, where we're projecting is even less than that as we've restructured a few things, but the bottom line, our spending on administration is projected to be about 3.1% of the revenue, well underneath that 5% statutory cap. So all the fun stuff that we're doing here, we run pretty lean. You guys know most of our staff and what we do, but we are well under state statute as far as what we need to be for finances. So that's all I've got to update you on. Like I said, these are at all of our board meetings. These are online. If you have any questions, if you'd rather do it private, we're around all day today and tomorrow. So I'll open that up. Has anybody got any questions or anything you want me covered?
So I'll talk about this slide real quick. So as during our recovery time period, we promised the airports that we weren't going to give you a week's notice that, hey, we're not going to have a grant program next year. So that's why this one is important. We said that we are going to make sure we can cover the upcoming program and the year following. That was kind of our promise to our airports, so we weren't having to make those mass changes. We don't let you make changes to your CIP in the next 2 years. We want to try to be able to hold that on our side as well. And that's why this slide is so important. This is what proves that we have the ability to do that. So there's lots of lines on here, but again, this does show that we are covered. And the thing that's not really talked about is we have to plan for the what if scenarios. And I'll go back to Denver. Like these very high numbers, we saw 47 million gallons flowed at Denver in July-ish.
Yep.
But we are protecting in case that goes down to 35, which is a massive decrease. We haven't seen less than 35 since February, and again, February is always crazy low no matter what. But again, we are planning for the what if scenarios to protect that current year plus one. That was a really big thing from our office. We lived through it. It hurt bad. We don't ever want to go back there. And that is how this slide protects us. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about this. But again, this is a really big slide. Doesn't look like a lot, but this is the protection, honestly, for our program right now. So. Any questions about the money? No, go ahead. That's right.
So as far as the float that comes in and funds the airports, how long are you able to hold on to that money before you have to distribute it?
We have no limits on when we have to distribute it. Now, the sales tax that comes in from Denver every month, like I said, 80 to 85% of our revenue comes from Denver. Well, that's, statutorily we reimburse 2/3 of the sales tax, 65% the exact of the sales tax back to the airport it originates at. As much of you know, you see those sales tax checks or EFTs every month. So a large chunk of that does go back to Denver next month, just like it does everybody else. That remaining 2/3 roughly, there's no statutory limit on how long that's our account. And honestly, there's no way for us to say, well, this is what money was spent, this is, and it's simply the cash balance there. So we have no requirement to spend it within a certain time frame. We have no requirement to hold on to it. As you'll hear, and you can see from that contingency slide too, we do not plan on holding a large cash balance that is unencumbered. Will our cash balance be large sometime? Yes. But in turn, that means our grants that are out there are going to be larger too. There is definitely a linear relationship between the two. So, like I said, we got 14 million or whatever it is on hand, 13.5 million on hand in cash balance. With the news that you guys are going to give you today, a lot of that is going to be already basically committed once we go through the CIP process. So.
And already has, because I would say we have $6 to $7 million in grants outstanding from the past 3 years that we're still paying off as well. So again, that number looks amazing, but that's where we have to be careful is, and also from the airline's perspective, we don't want to hold on to that money for a long time. All of that money is honestly committed already, which is really nice. So.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So October fuel flow at BIA.
Yep.
Looked like for the first year in 3 years, it ticked up instead of continuing down.
Excellent question. I love that. So that forecast is based on data I get right from Menzies. It changes every other month who the actual person is responsible for turning on the fuel taps at Denver. This is the information they're getting from the airlines and the fuel vendors. Hey, we need X amount of gallons scheduled to come to us this month. Now, the actual flowage will change and go with that. And if you saw our board meeting or at our board meeting, you heard me say, okay, they are projecting an increase, For consistency's sake, I use that number. I said, okay, we can follow the trend lines, and you guys can all do it sitting there. Realistically, I think that number's going to be probably down here because we've seen that drop September to October. But for the sake of consistency and using the data we're given, we plug that forecast in. And then when the actual comes in, we notify that, and we kind of give the board a heads up that saying this, it's a little high probably, but it's going to be there. Now what that does is it affects our revenue projection because this, as well as obviously the price of fuel, is what drives our revenue projection because that's what the biggest thing is based off of. So that's why you do see on the forecast slide with the revenues, saw up and down. There's a little bit below. That had to do with a lot of filings that didn't come through by the vendors in time in July. And that'll happen too, where United, if they don't file in the proper month at United, at Denver, our revenues are going to drop that month. We'll at least be able to say why. This is why, because I do track that in Denver every month. Because it is the biggest part of our program, it has that much of an effect. So, excellent question. Yeah, we follow that there for consistency. We use what's given to us, even though we can take somewhat educated guesses and inform the board that, hey, this projection might be a little high because of this. And sometimes it's lower too. It's not consistent where it's always high or always low. Any other questions?
And a big difference from the past as well is Bryce has developed an amazing relationship with the folks over at Denver with their finance group. So we are getting information directly from Denver on what their expectations are. So that is really key in our ability to forecast what those revenues are expected to be statewide.
Perfect. Going once, twice. All right, you're through with me.
I got to give Bryce a lot of kudos. The last 3 years, Bryce's revenue forecast has been within 1% at the end of the year of what he said it would be at the beginning of the year, which, given the complexities of our financial model, the price of fuel, the fuel flowage across 14 commercial service airports and the rest of the airports, pretty damn amazing. And so kudos to Bryce for really helping us do a much better job of forecasting. It's helping us do a lot better things for all of you. So Bryce, thank you. You guys have been fantastic. So real quick, I want to cover a little bit about that slide. They touched on it just a little bit. For those of you that aren't familiar, I'm sorry if it's a refresher for some of the folks that have been around a while. This is where our money comes from. All we get are 3 aviation fuel taxes collected at the state level. 2.9%, the state sales tax rate, is collected on all jet fuel, including the airlines. That's why most of our revenue comes from Denver. Colorado is incredibly unique. I think there's probably less than 6 states across 50 where the airlines pay state fuel tax. Sometimes we're not always happy about that. Those of you that have been around, I know Kenny's been involved with CAOA, every once in a while the airlines kind of go, why are we paying all this money? We also have, and I'll circle back to that in a minute, we also have 4 cents per gallon excise tax on non-commercial jet fuel, and then folks that fly single-engine piston aircraft pay 6 cents a gallon. So this year, that all totaled about $34 million. That's up from $33 in 2019, and we're projecting about $34.5 million here in FY20, although if some of the fuel trends go up, that might tick upwards a little bit. So that's where our money comes from. That's the only money we get. By state statute, that can only be spent on aviation purposes. So we do have that kind of protection that a lot of states don't have right now. So that's cool. So Bryce talked a little bit about fuel disbursements, and I know Casey, you had a question about that. So every month, state statute says we return 2/3 of the sales tax and 4 of the 6 cents of excise tax on avgas back to the airport where the fuel was sold. So we don't want to hang on to that money. So as soon as we get the money in from the Department of Revenue, Bryce turns around and gives you a disbursement. So we don't want to hang on to it. That's money for you to use. It doesn't do us any good sitting in our bank account. So you all get to use that money on whatever you want, as long as you're using it on the airport for aviation purposes. That is one of the reasons that when we go back to the airlines and explain that, no, we're not taking all the money from DEN and giving it to Creed, we're doing that part of it, but we're not doing it with all of it. They go, oh, wait a minute, we get tens of millions of dollars back that offsets our rates and charges at the airport? Oh, okay, we didn't know that. So that kind of helps us with that argument a little bit. So the pitch I always make to all of you is that as a state agency, we don't get to lobby or advocate with our legislators. We rely on all of you to do that, to help us protect this funding structure, because the airlines come to the state legislature and start wanting to change this like they do and they have when the price of fuel has gone up. You can see what would happen to our revenue and what our program would look like if we didn't have a tax on jet fuel. So just my little message to you, kind of help us pay attention to that and support that with your airlines and your communities, why this funding is so important to your airport the way we work. There's no other state, literally, this is not exaggerated, there's no other state in the country that has this kind of funding structure. It's pretty cool. So, and then the other 30% is the discretionary piece that the board has access for our CDAG program, for our statewide initiatives, and then as Bryce talked about, there's only 8 of us. We have a really lean ship. Our administrative overhead is pretty low. So that's just a little funding 101 on how our division works. So for this last year, just by recap, back in January, the Aeronautical Board awarded a total of 32 CDAG grants to 31 airports totaling $5.8 million. That doesn't sound like a lot of money necessarily, but that's up from $1.5 million just 3 years ago when we were in our financial austerity mode. So we're recovering very quickly to a nice tempo of what I would call a normal program. You all matched that with $5.1 million of your own money. We leveraged $55 million of Mark's money, and it was pretty cool. Last year in Colorado, we kicked off almost $66 million worth of airport projects through a partnership with all of you, and we appreciate that. And those numbers don't include DEN. They're their own animal. Tom has his own big batch of money he gets to handle with, so we don't do that. But you guys, what, another $20 million of AIP probably for you guys, Tom, roughly? Okay. So that's what we did last year. So let's talk a little bit about what we're looking at for this next year here in January. We are likely to recommend to the Aeronautical Board this year an increase from 5.8 to an 8.4 million program. So again, as our revenues continue to increase, you all are selling more fuel, the price of fuel is holding relatively consistent. That means more revenue for us to get out and projects we can do with all of you. So we'll all finalize this with the CIP stuff today, but we're looking at about $2.2 million of Fed match grants here in the first part of 2020, and $6.1 million of state and local for, again, a total program of about 8.4. So we're excited about that. The one thing that I will point out is that the federal match reflects the board's policy on grant cap. Earlier this year, the Aeronautical Board elected to maintain our $250,000 cap up to half of your local match on our CDAG grants. Now, the cool thing about our program is the word discretionary. Our board has the discretion to raise that above 250. So if any of you, or I'm looking at consultants, if any of your airports are doing a project where 250 doesn't cut it, work with your planners, let us know. You're going to have, it's a pretty high bar to ask for more money because we really, really want to stick to that 250 cap. But work with Todd and your planners if you've got a big project at a very small airport where they might not be able to make that match. We're willing to work with you and we're willing to work with the board. So let us know. But really what I think you're going to see our focus sort of go back to is trying to invest a lot of our state money in airports that don't get a lot of Fed money or don't get any Fed money. Those airports are just as important. We are very, very GA-centric here. Commercial service airports are important, but so are airports like Westcliff and Creed and Trinidad and all these other airports that are around. So we're going to work hard to support you all with investing money in runways and things that the feds might not have money for. So that's what we're going to be working for through our CIP with your planner. So that's why you see, again, almost 3/4 of next year's program will go to state and local projects to help you guys fund things the feds won't cover. Is there anything you want to add to that, Todd, about our philosophy on that?
And so we went back and forth on the cap issue because we had talked about increasing it back to levels of 400,000 in the past. But we started doing some analysis, and to be honest, there's only about 6 projects a year that need more than that $250,000 cap. So we thought that we'll leave it there and then be able to have the discretion to spend our state and local money, that we have less strings than the FAA does on some projects around the state. So it's not as if we kind of came up with that recommendation for the board just kind of willy-nilly. That was something we spent a lot of time on, ran a lot of reports to see what exactly that meant to our program, and in the end, that was our recommendation to the board. But beyond that, we do see that as our very important spot. But again, we do understand there's some airports out there that where their entire budget is $250,000. So those are kind of the conversations we want to have with the airports that just they will lose that project if our match stays at 250 and theirs ends up being maybe 800,000. So those are the conversations we definitely want with the planners and myself as those come up. But again, it is going to be a tough bar to meet, and we will expect some additional kind of maybe documentation. We're trying to figure out exactly what that means at this point, but we'll definitely want you involved with the board meetings as we go request that additional funding for you. So purely a heads up for that aspect.
And so going back to that, one of the things that we didn't necessarily touch on is this bar down here. Us to have between $1 million and $1.5 million what we call reserve. That's just money set aside in case something comes up. That would be the pool of money that we would pull from if an airport needed a larger match, because otherwise they would forego a big Fed grant because they didn't have the local match. That's where we have a little bit of money set aside as a rainy day fund now, which is kind of cool. It's there today. We just recently used it for 2 cool new projects. The board approved for the commercial service airports in the room. You know this. The board approved one-time statewide initiative of $400,000 to help commercial service airports and GA airports that have aircraft rescue firefighting acquire testing equipment that allows you to test your firefighting foam without spraying that toxic stuff on the ground. Who's heard of PFAS? Good. If you haven't heard of it, you're going to hear about it really soon. It's becoming a huge deal. That's the toxic chemical that's found in a lot of stuff, from Scotchgard and Gore-Tex and things like that to firefighting foam, and it's become a really big deal environmentally. That's going to be the next environmental issue after noise, I think. So anyway, that was an issue where we were able to, thanks to our forward thinking, able to have some money set aside that when we saw an opportunity to do something about this environmental issue and help airports, we had the money to do it. The other one we'll talk about here in a couple months is enhancements to our aviation weather observing systems up in the high country. So that'll be cool. But anyway, I just wanted to touch on the reserve as well that will allow us to accommodate extra grant requests if we need to without impacting anything else. So I'll sit down now because I think you guys are going to talk grant expectations. So.
You want to go, Caitlin?
You want me to go next?
Sure.
Am I doing contracts then?
No. Oh, yes, you are doing that contract setup.
Okay, so how many of you got a grant contract from us in 2019? Good. So they looked a little differently this year. The contracting has shifted. When I started the division 11 years ago, I was the grants administrator, so that's when I did the contracts and we did them in-house. I then transferred over to planning because CDOT started to centralize all of our contracting, so all the contracting was done through CDOT headquarters. In an effort to streamline it and make it easier for our office and better customer service for you guys, we have pulled contracting back into the office. So I'm doing the contracting again, which is awesome. I really enjoy being able to talk to all of you. But that also included some template changes and some other changes to the contracts. One of the big changes that we have changed is we now have the assurances, the grant assurances, that are an exhibit to every contract that you get. It doesn't matter what airport you're at, but everybody has those. We did not have that protection formally in our contracts prior to that. The other exhibit that you've all seen since the beginning of time is the Exhibit B, which is the grant resolution. We as a board are non-regulatory, so we cannot force you to take our money. You need to invite us into your community so that we can participate in projects in your community. That resolution is what lets the grant happen. So if you submit us a grant contract, no matter how perfect or pretty the signatures are, if we don't have the resolution, we can't do anything. The other thing that the grant resolution does is we've changed it so that it also allows for you as the project director to sign grant contracts and amendments. So if you have a process locally that takes a really long time to get contracts executed, you can request the resolution from us ahead of time. You can put the resolution through. We can even give you a draft copy of the contract so they can see the language and stuff. You can get that resolution passed locally so that then when you get the contract from us, you have the ability to sign the contract and turn it around and get an executed contract back very quickly. As we start to increase our state and local projects, that will be very important. The feds will pay you retroactively for projects that you've done ahead of time. We cannot. It is against state statute for us to reimburse you for anything that has happened prior to the execution date of that contract. So as we get closer to more state and local projects and bigger, more higher dollar projects, this may be an option that you guys want to exercise. It's getting that executed resolution done first, so that as soon as we have a contract, you can sign it, get it back, and we can get your notice to proceed to you faster. If there's money spent before you have your notice to proceed and the executed contract is done, that's all on you. So there's your warning, okay? And everyone watching as well. That's the warning. So hi, Russ. The other thing we have is when we updated everything, there are two different contracts now. The grant contract used to be 22 pages for everyone, no matter who you are. Meadow Lake is the lucky one that only has a 22-page contract left. Everyone else is a governmental agency. You guys now only have 9 pages, plus the additional exhibits. So it's a lot shorter, more condensed, and not nearly as, there's like the governmental immunity, all that stuff has been completely, none of that is a concern. So it should be easier for your local attorneys to review and all that. If you also have stuff you want to get ahead of time so you can have attorneys review it, but you don't necessarily want the resolution to get passed, if you ask, we can give you samples of all the documents so that you can get them looked over by your attorneys and all, and get them comfortable with it. The likelihood of us changing our contract for what your attorneys want is very small, but they always have to look at it anyway, and we understand that.
Right.
The new grant agreements for the governmental agencies, they don't say grant agreement at the top, they say grant award letter. So that is one change, it doesn't say grant agreement on it. We've also added an option letter at the back. So it will be a lot easier for us to do, they're not formal amendments anymore, they're just option letters. So that's executed unilaterally by the state. After you guys have requested changes and we've approved those changes, we will be able to do those without a big routing of amendment and all of that stuff. So there's your changes to contracts. Any questions?
So I'll say Caitlin downplayed certain aspects of this. She said we brought contracting back in-house. A big thing for me, big thing for the division is customer service. So in the past, when we had to give that up to our CDOT headquarters, sometimes it was taking us a month for them to draft a contract for us. And we understand that when we get approval in January for those state and local projects, you can't even start design, bid, anything on those until we get an executed contract in place. And so that was pushing, so we go to headquarters for drafting a month later, then we get that, there's issues, we send it back. 2 weeks later, we get a good draft to us. We send it to you, it takes 2 weeks to get it signed, and all of a sudden it's July by the time we actually get an executed contract. So it took nearly an act of God for us to get this back in-house. We actually have a pilot program with the state controller's office. There was a lot of people involved in this. But we wanted that back in-house so we could control that process. So we have got it down to the point where Caitlin, once we got that board approval, we were able to get those state and local grants out, at least drafted, within that next week. And that was all of them. And so that gets that contract in your guys' hands so you can sign it when we can get through the entire signature process, hopefully much quicker, so we can get into that design phase so we can get those bids on the street. That's really what that process was for, and it was really a big deal, and we saw that as a big improvement on our side. So she downplayed that a little, and she has been amazing to take over this, because again, she isn't our contract writer anymore. She's our planner, but now she is also about 15-20% of her job is actually drafting those contracts for you guys now. So it's a big deal, and hopefully you guys see the positive effect of that on your side. So it's been really good from our office. But again, customer service is huge for us, and especially for Caitlin. So.
All right, with no other questions, I think that's all I have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll kind of get into some priorities at this point. So I'll go back to our FY 2020 plan program. We're able to do this because, yet again, CIPs, we're kind of locked in for the next 2 years. So we really know what our program is going to look like this next year. I definitely didn't put the federal number in there because I know we try not to put the federal number in there until it's actually awarded at this point. But a lot of people have questions of what are we spending like that $6.15 million of state and local funding. So over those past 4 years where we only gave out $150,000 per airport for purely federal match, we missed out on a lot of pavement maintenance. So we have been catching up on a lot of pavement maintenance. So that 6.15 accounts for about 22 pavement maintenance projects across the state. So again, that is our big focus right now, is to catch up the state on those projects that we missed out on over the last 4 years. So that's kind of what accounts for that. Also, we are looking at AWOS installations across the state, seeing where there are holes in that map too. And so we're trying to get some more AWOS locations in to fill some of those gaps too. And then, kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about was state and local grant oversight. So in the past, when we give out some big grants from our office, we really, here's your grant, good luck, I hope it looks good in the end. That doesn't make the best sense for our money. So I know the FAA has they do a very good job of oversight of the projects that they're involved with. So this is a big piece that we are actually going to be involved with going forward. So again, a lot of those pavement grants, we won't have a lot of pieces in those. Those are pretty easy grants. But once we give out those big dollar grants, reconstructions, that type of project, we want to be involved in those quite a way through the process. Even being involved to the point where having the airport consultant contract sent to us so we can see what is in that to make sure the scope matches what we're doing. Make sure we get as-built after it's done, electronic as-builts. Change orders, this is a big one. So we are non-regulatory, so we can't exactly sign those change orders, but what we want to do is we want to be included in the process to make sure that if you are making changes to grants where it's just a state and local grant, again, we can't formally sign them, but we want every one of those, a requirement to have those submitted to us so we can at least see what's going on. Because then at that point we can raise red flag and say, hey, this probably is not eligible, that type of talk. So change orders are a big deal, and we will be watching them very closely. But those will be required to be sent to us. And if they're not sent to us, to be honest, that change order may not be eligible for funding on our side. So another big one for us is a post-project walkthrough. So in the past, usually we saw projects after they were done when we'd go out and do PCI. So we actually have a big project going on down at Meadow Lake right now, and that was really state and local funded. We did have some entitlement funds from the FAA on that, but we want to be involved in those project walkthroughs as well, so we can see how our money is being spent. And to be honest, we owe it to our board to be able to go out there. They've approved all this money for these projects. We need to make sure they are being completed in the best way. Also, project construction meetings. Please invite us to project construction meetings. We probably won't be able to attend, but if you could give us the phone call information, we need to have an idea. Our planners need to have an idea of what's going on with these projects. Because we do get asked every once in a while, hey, what's going on with this project here? I know we spent a lot of money with it, and we need to be able to answer that question. And then weekly progress reports. I believe consultants have to do them for federal projects. We would like them to be done for state projects as well. So our planners have a good idea where all these projects stand. And again, we will want those progress reports submitted in WIMS as well when you do drawdowns, just to allow us to get a better handle on how these projects are going. I don't want to get back to the days where we give an airport $3 million and say, we really look forward to this being done, and we'll see it next PCI season. So again, please help us in that aspect. We're really defining these right now, and once we get them fully defined, we will be putting this into our programs and procedures manual for you all to see, and they'll kind of become policy at that point. But again, purely a heads up, as we have more money to spend, our planners are really going to be more involved in some of those big projects around the state. So do you guys have any questions about any of the CDAG program, oversight, amendments, any of our funding topics before we move on to statewide initiatives?
Do you want to see the weekly inspection reports, construction projects that we send to the FAA? Do you just want to be included those if you're part of
If you could include us on those, that'd be awesome. But again, we spend a lot of money on federal match projects, and it would be great to know what's going on with those too. It just gives us a better idea of the impact of what our funds are doing. So we would love to be included in those as well.
Follow up on that, as far as the state funded and locally funded projects, do you want us to use the federal form or just the weekly progress?
You can use a weekly. We don't need that on any special form. We just need to know what's going on, to be honest. We just want the information so we can answer questions that they come up. We don't fear an audit by any means. We want to be able to answer an audit if an auditor should ever come out and ask, hey, where's this project? You gave $3 million to an airport. What's going on? We need to be able to answer that question. We owe it to everyone to be able to answer that question, to be able to stand by where our money is.
Yeah, and that was going to be my point. Was anybody here when the Office of the State Control did the 2009 audit? Not many people. I was in the airport world at that time. that was kind of a really interesting moment for us. And an audit will come again. That happens on a regular basis, not because they think you're doing something wrong, but one of the things we have really worked hard on in the last 4.5 years is making sure that when, not if, but when we do get audited, we have good answers for all of these people to show the state, to show all of you, to show our board, to show the airlines that we're being smart with our money. We're paying attention to where it's going, and that when we do get those tough questions, we have these. So please, we're not trying to make more work for anybody. We're not trying to get into the business. We're not engineers. You know, we're not the ones that could say, yeah, that's a good engineering solution or not. That's not what we do. We just want to make sure when somebody comes in and says, hey, you gave Airport XYZ a $3 million grant, how do you know that money is going to what you said it was supposed to go to and what the board said it was supposed to go to? We want to be able to go, yep, got it all right here, and look like superstars. That's really our goal. We went through a performance audit after, which was it wasn't a financial audit, it was a performance audit, had 26 recommendations. If we got adopted and figured out within 18 months. We fixed all the issues. That was 4 years ago. It's not going to surprise me. The Office of the State Controller is going around auditing different parts of CDOT right now. Who knows? We might be next. So anyway, I just wanted to follow along with that. That's why we're doing all that, so that they don't come back to us later and say, you've got to change it, you need to do it this way, and guess what? The way they want us to do it doesn't work for any of you. We don't want to do that. So that's the reason for all that. So thank you. If you have any ideas, too, on how we can do that better, man, we're all ears, because we want to make sure that we look like rock stars when we get asked the tough questions.
Todd?
Yes, Ron.
I know you were state and local grant oversight, but when they're doing change orders,
yes,
do you now want them to route all of them through CDOT also?
Again, just state and local. Those federal match, we know you guys have very good oversight of those. I mean, to be honest, we'd like to see it just to make sure our funding is still within its limits, to be honest, to make sure something's not getting funded outside of our program. But yeah, it's really those state and local ones are the ones we really need to watch, because we understand change orders happen. You open up a piece of pavement and that you thought the subgrade was great, and you find out it's purely sand. So those things do happen, but we want to make sure we're really involved with that process and it's not happening in a vacuum outside of our program. So we need to make sure our money is being spent on what our money is supposed to be spent on. So, and there's, I mean, again, we can't stop. We need to be involved in the process. So please expect to see our planners' faces more often out of some of those big projects around the day. They're excited to get out of the office. So, all right. Any other questions? All right. We will jump into statewide initiatives. And we'll be tag teaming this one a little bit.
So good morning, everybody. Just going to talk about a couple of statewide initiatives. The first two, the internship program update and the new AWAS maintenance reimbursement program. So the internship, the aviation internship program that we have going is probably one of the most important and one of the most coveted statewide initiatives that we have up and running. And we had some discussions not too long ago about how we can keep this thing competitive and viable and attractive to help people, to help attract new graduates and people who are interested in entering into the airport management game. And what we proposed to the Colorado Aeronautical Board was an increase in the cap that we would support up to $20 an hour. So what that means is that for an airport that has an internship program, we will support a increase in wages up to $20 an hour, and that would equate to $20,800 per year for internship per state fiscal year. So if an airport wants to increase their wages and offer anywhere from $14 up to $20 per hour, that is live, and that can be done now. It's a state grant program. It is a program that an airport can apply for a grant any time of year throughout the year. It doesn't follow any of the other standard state and local or federal match grant programs that we have. So I know right now in the state there are 8 airports that have internship programs. If there is an airport out there that wants to initiate one of these internships, all they have to do is submit a grant application that would include a syllabus and an overview of what they expect their interns to experience throughout the year. So that's basically it for that.
So how many airports here have interns? Awesome. How many people in here were interns? So again, it's amazing to see the impact of this program.
So you're saying that you're capping our ability to pay our interns up to only $14 an hour, or are you saying that's your cap right now?
Our cap will support an hourly wage of $20 per hour. So that means we will provide half of that wage. So $10 an hour is what we do. And that wage, that includes regular hourly wages only. If the airport is requesting reimbursement for overtime wages, we would pay up to the grant award amount only. It doesn't include benefits or vacation time or any kind of other time off or holiday pay. It's the regular wages. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And what this does is, so our our internship program was capped at half of $16 an hour since before I started. It was really funny to watch Mr. Kloska back there say, when you said we were changing it to 20, because I remember it too. It was not even 16 when we started. But we really thought about it internally here, and we heard from airports that they're having trouble finding good candidates and having trouble being able to pay them enough to move to some of these. Honestly, in Aspen, no one's going to move to Aspen for $16 an hour because you can't unless you bring a tent. And so we wanted to make sure we were allowing airports to keep this program full. We're not requiring airports to change their rate to $20 an hour. We're giving them the ability to update it to $20 an hour so they can make the best informed decision to get qualified candidates at their airport. So we spent a lot of time doing this. Patrick, the intern in our office, he talked to all the airports, did a survey for all to find out, are there airports that are hitting that cap? Is that cap causing them issues? And so, again, we spent a lot of time developing where we needed to move this to, especially seeing that the rate you work at McDonald's now rivals some airport management as well. So again, we wanted to make this program viable because it has such a huge impact to the state. Our staff, 6 of the 8 of us were interns as well through programs like this. So this is one we wanted to push forward, and again, we're just making sure airports can keep their program viable with this update to $20 an hour.
Cool. So the next thing I'll talk about is the AWAS maintenance reimbursement program. So last year I promised everybody here a brand new crack film machine. So this year everybody gets a new AWAS, right? No. That's not true. So one of the new statewide initiatives that we have implemented is the ability for airports who have airport-owned AWAS systems to get reimbursement for their maintenance expenditures, and that includes unplanned and planned maintenance activities for those units. So what we did, establish a program that is very much like the crack fill program, where an airport can purchase an amount of crack fill material utilizing a state purchasing agreement, and then we will reimburse the airport 90% up to $10,000 per state fiscal year for their crack fill. And that's exactly the same way that we would do it with the AWAS program. So currently we have a state purchasing agreement with DBT that establishes those rates. Airports that have AWAS systems but are not contracting with DBT, that use some other to fulfill their maintenance requirements, are still eligible to participate in this program. But when they submit reimbursement for those maintenance activities, included with the invoices, they would have to go ahead and scan and attach their actual maintenance contract with that provider. So you do it exactly the same way as you would do it with the crack fill program. Get onto the WIMS portal and then select AWAS, and then it'll bring up some boxes that you would complete and an area where you could attach those those invoices and other documents that would need to be done. It's quite simple. We've already had a submitted reimbursement request, and they, if they haven't been paid, they're about to get paid.
How many airports have AWOS that they own and operate? How much does it cost for you to maintain your AWOS on an annual basis, Stacey?
A little over 5,000 a year.
5,000 a year. And so that's if no sensors go down as well. So on the kilometers, as everyone who owns an AWOS knows, it's a $27,000 piece of equipment that can go out. And so what we wanted to do, again, we're really excited to have more money. It's a very good thing. And so what we wanted to do is be able to help out some airports take care of this very equipment. And we understand that AWOS at your airport, great for your airport, but it also has a bigger impact than just your airport. And so that's why we actually created this program, because not only does it help your airport, it helps people flying past your airport headed to another airport in our state. So we saw this as a great statewide impact to be able to take over at least these maintenance costs for you, because as we all know, we could use a little bit more money for airports to put it to different things. And so we wanted to take this statewide safety aspect kind of off your plate, at least up to $10,000 as much as we can, so you can really spend some other money on some other programs at your airport. So again, we were excited to be able to roll this out, and again, did that statewide purchasing agreement to try to help you guys so you wouldn't have to go through all of your purchasing rules. Unfortunately, only one vendor submitted, so I failed that process, but we tried. But again, this is a very important program for us, and if you need more information about it, please talk to us one-on-one. They're ready to talk about this. We want to get this money out the door to help you guys. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Please reach out. Go ahead, Turner.
Yeah, I was wondering, is there any thought given to the ability for an airport to bank their 1 year entitlement to that reimbursement to the following year to be able to double up?
We have not been discussing that.
Yeah, it doesn't really work for us that way, because we only protect a certain amount of money each year. We don't roll those funds in. At the end of every one of our fiscal years, which is June 30th, all of these statewide initiatives, all the money remaining in there gets wiped clean, put that back in our aviation money to use. So unfortunately, we're not able to bank that money.
Like I said, if you guys have any additional questions about either program, please reach out to your state planner. Also, go to our website and look at our programs and procedures manual. So section 5.2 covers the aviation, our programs and procedures manual, and then section 5.1 will cover the AWOS, the entire AWOS program, including the AWOS maintenance program.
It's hard to believe we actually have 60 automated weather systems across the state, so we are well covered. And again, I talked about it a little bit earlier, there are 3 spots in the state that there's somewhat gaps, and we're hoping to fill those gaps within the next 3 years. So again, weather's a big deal in Colorado, and we want to be able to support that as much as we can.
Is there any portion that needs to be covered before you guys cover up to the 10,000?
Not at all.
Right. And so it's 90%, we cover 90% of that reimbursement. The airport does the rest. Go ahead.
Does that include, most of us that have AWOS, they're getting old. So this program, would that include sort of refurbing or upgrade new ones?
Yeah.
We go down that road, we're going to get a new...
yes, we can do that depending on, what that's going to cost. Also, there is potential for grants as well for replacement of those units. So, and then that's just something that, we can talk on a case basis.
Yeah, and to that point specific, if your AWOS is getting to the point where it's probably not going to last a lot longer, or if you can't find replacement parts for your specific AWOS, let's get something like that into your CIP for a full replacement, to be honest. Again, we'll help that state and locally, but that's something that will kind of be outside of this program. We see this truly to be kind of your maintenance of that program, replacement of certain sensors, just making sure it stays operational. But if you need an outright replacement of it, let's see where that fits into your CIP in the upcoming future, please.
Greg, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to let you know that our AWOS went down about 2 months ago in the kilometer.
What?
And started reporting a 600-foot ceiling when it was clear. And so I shut it off, and I fielded about 15 phone calls that day from people wanting to know what's wrong with our AWOS. And it cost us I don't, you could probably got that would have been over half my maintenance, so it really helps us out.
Yeah, I believe yours was around 30,000 if I remember right when I saw it come through.
So was mine.
Yeah, I know.
Anything else about AWAS or intern? Yes, sir.
About the mountain AWAS systems, I get calls all the time about the Monarch AWAS, the win on that.
I get those calls too.
Yeah, you should reach out to us as soon as you get complaints. Let us know that there's a glitch, and then we will get the Office of Information Technology to start working it.
So Monarch specifically. So the wind sensors, we were told they don't work great above 10,000 feet. Unfortunately, most of our passes are above 10,000 feet. So Monarch was down so long because we were waiting on new, like brand new sensors to be sent to us. And they come from overseas. And the people who make them took a month holiday when we ordered them. And so it came back up a week ago. We installed 3 of these brand new sensors across the state to help those winds, because we get plenty of those calls. Not from people flying, but from people that are hiking usually. So. But yeah, so those are coming on board, and we're hoping to get 3 more replaced this year across the state, so we can stop running into those winds. Yeah, it is widespread that we're trying to get fixed right now. But yeah, Monarch's back up, so you can tell them to stop calling.
Anything else? Cool, thank you.
I'll finish up with a couple of other things here on that. Thanks, Todd. Todd does a great job managing our AWAS units. It's really up and running in the places that they're located. Travis Boleen, our former director, always said we put AWASs where God never meant AWASs to go, and so they're challenging to maintain, unfortunately. So anyway, great job on that. So just a couple of other updates. I'll fill in for Scott on the aviation system plan and our economic impact study. Both of those are moving forward very, very well. We plan to be done in April, and as we get closer to putting a draft document out, we'll be sure to send that to all of you. We do have a project advisory committee that includes Mr. Mampa and Mr. Lacone to help us kind of guide that from an airport perspective. But that system plan, when it's done, is really going to be one of the primary guiding tools that we and our board use going forward, to make sure that the deficiencies and the gaps that are identified in our system plan are reflected in our plan on how we adapt those. So we're excited to have that. It's our first system plan since 2011. So our current one is pretty out of date. We're looking forward to that. Concurrent with that, we're also doing the aviation economic impact study that might be available in December as a final version. I think it's probably going to be closer now to January or February. Scott and on our team in particular has really dived into the details of the economic impact study. Kimley Horn's doing a fantastic job, but we really want to make sure that when we give you guys your economic numbers, that they're credible, that they're correct, and that they're as accurate as they can possibly be. Some of your numbers went up, some of your numbers went down, and we want to make sure that when the numbers have gone down, in particular, we can explain to you very clearly what changed and what assumptions were made with all of that. Not a lot of airports have gone down, some of them have, but anyways, we really want to make sure that's accurate, because we know that's such a great tool for you guys in your community. We don't want anybody to go, oh, that's ridiculous. So we're going to take a little extra time to make sure we get that right. You'll see some draft numbers before they're published so that you have a chance to kind of give us some feedback, but all the surveys you did, I know they were a pain in the butt, that's really the information that we use to help drive us. So most of the data will come from things you all provided us, so stay tuned for that too.
And when we release that, we understand we're going to get calls from airports. And when we release the past study, airports would call and say, hey, where did this number come from? I don't know. Here's our consultant's number. Again, customer service is a big, we want to be able to answer those questions. And Scott has done a great deal getting our staff prepared to answer some of those questions for you guys to call, because we do need that data. We need to be able to answer those questions for us. That's our study. We need to stand behind it. So it's, again, big deal for us. We spent a lot of time on it.
I know Denver's really excited for theirs. So anyway, just real quickly, the State Infrastructure Bank Loan Program. Who is not familiar with the Aviation State Infrastructure Bank Loan Program? You're not? Okay, real quickly, that is a revolving loan fund that is right now, it's capitalized to the tune of about $24 million. It's a fund where the Aeronautical Board, in partnership with the Transportation Commission, can issue to an airport to do a project with a repayment up to 10 years with an interest rate that's right now between 3 and 3.25%. So it's really cool. All of the interest that's generated from those loan payments goes back into the program. So the more loans we have out, the more money comes into it, and the amount that's available to loan grows. So it's pretty cool. I am really 4.5 years since I joined the division. We have put out 5 SIP loans. That's more SIP loans in the last 4.5 years than in the previous 15. It was a chunk of money that wasn't being used. So we have really, I think, worked hard with the Transportation Commission, with our counterparts at CDOT, to make that application process as smooth and as easy as right now. $23 million or so. It goes up a little bit as everybody makes their payment every year. All but about $2 million is in play. It's out doing stuff in communities across Colorado. So we're really excited about that. So if that's something that you think you're interested in, the eligibility requirements are pretty broad. It doesn't have all of the reward discretionary programs have. So the most recent loan we approved, I don't think anybody from the Springs is here, but just last month, the Transportation Commission, who is the ultimate approver of all the SIP loans at CDOT, approved a $7.5 million loan for the Springs. They're leveraging some U.S. Forest Service money and some of their own money to use heavy air tanker servicing space that will also be used as an aircraft de-icing facility in the wintertime. So very, very cool thing. It's going to allow them to support the global supertanker, which is based down there, and some of the larger heavy air tankers, which of course that's a benefit that goes far beyond Colorado Springs, because those airports or airplanes are fighting fires all across Colorado. So anyway, check with your planner if you're interested. One of the things that I'm advocating very, very hard for with folks at CDOT is trying to find a way to get some more, maybe some general fund money into that program and capitalize it with some more money, because we're down to such a low balance right now. It gets replenished to the tune of about $2 to $2.5 million. We would like to see some money on that, so we're working hard on that. But it's a cool opportunity. If you need some information, get with your planner, get with Todd. We'd love to get more of those out.
Well, and we understand there's a lot of need out there for terminals. GA terminals, commercial service terminals. And that's what Dave's talking about with that possible additional money, and that's why we're a little worried that there's not a lot of need out there. We want to make sure we can help work on that need through this program.
So the other project I'll give you an update on too real quick is our remote tower project we're doing up at Jason's Airport at the Northern Colorado Regional Airport with FAA. It's moving forward well. I think I would be less than accurate if I said Jason and I and a lot of others were not involved in that project. Some of the FAA testing is continuing to get pushed back as they want to look at more human factors issues and more testing of the technology. So it's one of the drawbacks of being out there literally on the, I hate the term, but bleeding edge. You know, we're the first remote air traffic control tower in the world to combine cameras with, and being the first sometimes doesn't go as fast as we would like, but right now our plan is to start mobile tower operations here potentially in November if all comes together. Maybe in January we'll actually see some of the first phase of the actual air traffic control taking place with the remote tower. So we'll kind of see how that goes. Right now our end goal is to have that certified hopefully by the end of 2021, I think is our latest schedule. So Jason, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you got anything to add from your standpoint back there.
No, I think you captured it well. You know, being the pioneer, you know, the pioneers were the ones that got shot by the Indians. Have taken some of the licks, but you know, I think we have a lot of good support with our pilot community, a lot of our users, and we have a lot of excitement growing with the addition of you know, a lot more air traffic and other things that are happening in West Colorado. So you know, the timing is coming. It's a little bit front of a lot of the challenges that we're facing just internally with the FAA on supporting the timelines and you know, getting all of the contracts in order to you know, provide the support services that we need in order to do all the testing and ultimate certification of the system. So I think it's on track. It's really exciting to look at the picture up there. You know, all the primary components of the system have been installed. Now we're just looking at getting the time for the people to come out from FAA headquarters and you know, all over the country basically to start that initial phase 1 of operational testing and evaluation. So we're excited that that's going to be happening soon.
And so if you're interested on the updates, we're about ready to put a major update here, but Sean's done a great job of developing a really comprehensive website, coloradoremototower.com. If you're interested in seeing what's going on, want some close-up videos of the technology, check out the website. It's pretty cool. So we'll keep plugging along and give you an update, but like I said, it's always exciting. One of the new statewide initiatives that the board provided us funding for last year was a new Airport and Governance 101 program. One of the things we realized as part of our aviation education mission is that we have a lot of airports in Colorado that are managed by folks that aren't necessarily full-time airport managers. They might be a public works director who doesn't necessarily have aviation as their primary job, but they're somehow in their small community tasked with running their airport, and they may not know about grant assurances or NOTAMs or airfield condition inspections and reporting and all those kinds of things. So one of the things we've done is we put together a program with Aviation Management Consulting Group where we are going to put on non-professional, but non-aviation airport managers, where for a whole day you can come for free. We will actually pay for your travel, we will pay for your per diem, and we will pay for your lodging to come to Denver to sit in and get a one-day class on basically Airport Management 101 specific to airports and one-day crash course. Maybe it'll eventually evolve into a two-day where we do a 201 with some more advanced things. So if any of you are interested in that, let us know. We had originally intended to do that in conjunction with this, and I think next year we will. But this year we didn't have it quite together yet where we were ready to roll it out. We're about 90% there, but it's January. So if you're interested, get with your planner, let us know. Again, no cost. We will reimburse you for your travel, so it's nothing out of pocket for you and your community. We really wanted to encourage participation. So the other cool program we're going to do along with that is a much more condensed, higher level, half-day airport elected operators, except for Dave, report to an elected official of some kind, somehow. And sometimes those elected officials don't know about things like grant assurances and NOTAMs and how FAA funding works and what land use is and all these other things. So Aviation Management Consulting Group has also put together just targeted for elected officials that what we're going to try to do is put those on at the annual conferences of Colorado Counties, CCI, that covers county managers, and the Colorado Municipal League, which covers city managers. So look for that to roll out hopefully next year if we're able to get in with those two associations and partner up. Yeah, Stacey?
Are you going to film somehow, make them available for those of us who live a distance away?
We have not talked about that yet. We probably will film the airport elected officials. We have not had a conversation about the Airport Management 101 yet, but we'll talk about that. You bet. Yes, sir.
To clarify, the elected officials, it's for the elected officials, not the
correct.
Board. As she was saying, fill up more where you have like a road show. Because obviously I'm not going to get from there.
No, that would be a road show. So like the, I think CC, I'm going to get it backwards. One of the associations is meeting in Vail. One meets here in Thornton. So we will take that to wherever their conference is, whether it's here in Denver or maximum participation. We did that at the CCI conference here about 3 years ago. It was only a 2-hour session. It was really well received. And I think one of the feedback we got was, man, that could have been longer and there wasn't enough time for Q&A. So I see Steve nodding back there. So again, we'll get some information out about those once we coordinate with CCI and CML. May or may not happen depending on what they want to do. But if not, we may try to do one here in Denver and just say, hey, if you're interested, at least do something like that. So again, we really appreciate the support of the board, and now we have the resources to get to do something like that. So it's pretty cool. We talked a little bit about PFAS, acronym for polyfluoral substances, and again, that's the toxic chemical. It's bad, it's nasty stuff. It never goes away. I don't know, was anybody who was at the CAOA conference in June and heard that presentation? It's kind of scary stuff. I never knew all about it. I spent 10 years as an aircraft firefighter in a previous life and played in that stuff all the time. Good thing I'm still here, I guess. So, and if you're not familiar with it here in Colorado, it's become a huge deal in the Springs with Peterson Air Force Base. That was for a long, long time an aircraft rescue firefighting training facility, both on the civilian side, that's where I did my first burn, and on the military side. There's so much PFAS groundwater contamination in that area. The city of Fountain having their municipal water supply and pay to connect to the city of Colorado Springs water supply. So it's been a big deal in Michigan. When you all know what's going on with water quality in Michigan, you've heard that. It's going to be, if it's not on your radar in the next 6 months, it will be. There are lawsuits coming. There's no way to dispose of it. There's no place in Colorado that's licensed to dispose of foam that I know of. It's pervasive. It really is really bad stuff. The problem is right now the FAA requires you as a certificated airport to use foam that has this stuff in it because it's bad for the environment, but it's really great at putting out fires. The FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 did have a provision in there that requires the FAA to come up with an alternative 2021 moving very fast. They just now completed the testing facility to start testing different foams. That's what they've done in the last 2 years. So I'm not trying to throw the FAA under the bus, but sometimes the testing part of that doesn't happen. So there's some in Europe that have tested some new foams that are PFAS free, but again, pay attention to that because it's going to become a state requirement that fire districts are not allowed after August 29th of this year to use PFAS foam in training. That does not apply to Part 139 airports. There's an extension or exemption rather if it's required by federal law, and you're not allowed to buy it or use it in any There's already state action happening on that regard. So anyway, pay attention to that. But again, the program that our board approved funding for, which was pretty cool, was to help the certificated airports that have to spray it as part of their annual certification inspection to do so into a cart that allows you to test the refractivity. Get a statewide pricing agreement for that. For you commercial service airports, there's only 2 vendors that do it aftermarket. One of those vendors chose not to submit a pricing agreement to us. Todd's trying to sort that out so that we can get you the best price possible and make our money go farther. So not only are we including the 130 firefighting, so that's Centennial, Rifle, Greeley, and I'm missing one, and Front Range. Excuse me. I'll get it right, Dave. Colorado Air Spaceport. I promise I'll do it. So anyway, stay tuned to that. Even if it's not, you're not an airport that has that on your airport, it will become a big deal at your
It was last week. I failed at that price agreement too. So we're working on it.
So that's it. The last thing I'll talk about is our education program. For the last 5 years, the board did not allocate any funding to our education grant program. That's one of our statutory mandates. We just didn't have the money to do it. This year, they did approve 250,000 after the first of the year. So if you and your community have a group that's doing aviation workforce development, we're really not going to be looking at like the K through 12 things that we did before. Some of you that have been around remember we used to fund a Wings aerospace program with the Wings over the Rockets Museum to kind of development, aircraft mechanic development, air traffic controllers, technicians, engineers, to get people to have jobs in the industry that we all rely on here. So we may bump that up next year. We'll see how it goes. But if you've got a group that may be interested in that, get with your planner and we'll support folks in our industry. It's pretty important.
Quick question.
Yeah.
On that. How would we get information on that to like the colleges in town?
We are going to put together here in the next month. Sean knows this. He doesn't know yet. Actually, we're going to put together.
Right now.
He's working on it right now. We're going to put out an outreach on how to apply. It will be done through WIMS. So we'll work with applicants that if they want to apply, we'll have to get them a WIMS login like we did before. The board has published some guidelines on what's eligible, what's not, what the max are. And so we'll get all that out in that missive here in the next month at the same time.
And we do have a lot of that information in our programs based in that education program that we just updated within the last 6 months. So please log on to that. There's a whole section on our updated, and it has the timelines, has a flow chart of how all that works. So yeah, if you're looking for a document to send to them right now, that's going to be a really good one.
It'll be new for us. And speaking of WIMS, one of the things that we're working hard on with WIMS, and again, Tom, we're really working hard to develop WIMS even further to do cool stuff for us. Going back a little bit, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to start tying our performance metrics from our system plan in with the grants we give in WIMS, so we'll be able to report out, hey, the system plan said you needed to work on crosswind runways at these airports. We can go back and say, well, hey, here's all your WIMS, so that's pretty cool. The other thing that Todd just really rocked, our division, again, we're trying to always do things better. We volunteered to be one of 2 CDOT teams that participated in the Lieutenant Governor's Lean Talent Challenge to do some kind of process improvement for CDOT. And that was a challenge across the the one we picked was how can we do the SIB loan application process better? The way it used to be done up until this last one, you actually had to fill out a PDF or type it or write it in on a piece of paper. And then the paper got scanned in and got sent around and got lost and got misdirected and got deleted and stuff. Very good process for us or the applicant. So thanks to the Colorado Springs Airport, their last SIB loan application was done all entirely in WIMS. And Todd created an entire WIMS application that will allow us to make it easier for the applicant, easier for us, and easier for our counterparts at Department or Division of Accounting and Finance at CDOT who actually process the loan and make stuff better. And paper intensive. So that was a great example of one of, I think, the cool things that we're trying to do to make stuff better.
I think I've asked you about this in the past, but it would be great to have a master address list where we can print out address labels for the other airports. Many of us like to send around postcards.
That's good. Let's see what we can do about that. It's not top secret info.
Just hit the button and the address labels will print out.
And we have an intern, so awesome.
Even an email list would be good too.
An email list, a phone list,
Okay.
an address
Cool.
list.
I think that's easy to do. Right, Patrick?
Yeah, we even have trouble keeping up with our address list for everybody because there's movement in the aviation management industry. So we have to update ours every time we send something out. So.
Yeah, I think I've got 6 or 7 returned.
Yep.
From last.
So yeah, we update ours probably every month. Kenny?
Is that your annual updates in your direct?
The addresses, if you go, they're on 5010 web if you want to go.
Yeah, the emails are.
But yeah, we'll look into it for you, Stacey.
I don't think that's not a heavy lift.
No, I think we can do it. Shouldn't be a big deal at all. And airport manager specifically, is that accurate?
Yeah, physical addresses is what I have trouble with.
Okay.
Various different places, it'd be great to have them all in one place.
Cool.
But
No, thank you.
physical addresses, you have to.
So that's a perfect segue into, because we're wrapping up with our stuff, we're done, then we'll take a break and turn it over to Mark and his crew. What can we do better to help you? Something like that, is there something else that we can do or something that we think about here? So we're all ears. We really want to respond to you, and as Todd emphasized, individually and collectively, our division has a really big focus on customer service. We care about aviations, we care about aircrafts too. We've only been doing this a long time.
We learned, but it's fine.
We really want to make sure we're doing the best stuff for you. So is there any uncomfortable shout out here? Get with me, get with Todd, get with your planner, but we're all ears. That's how we came up with the AWAS maintenance program. We heard that AWAS maintenance was a struggle. We created a program. We knew PFAS was going to be a problem for airports. We tried to come up with a solution to at least help with part of that. So those are the kinds of things that we want to do, and we're all ears. You got a better idea? Something we're not doing a big deal?
Can you give us an update on where Colorado Springs and other airports are headed with land use?
Land use, that's a big one. So, yeah, it's interesting. As Todd has mentioned several times, our division does not have a regulatory or an enforcement charge or authority. Some states do. Lake, I'm looking at Dave, he's smirking. Erie, Longmont, Boulder, I'm looking at Dennis, I saw Dennis back there.
You name it.
Centennial, it's becoming a big deal. One of the conversations that is coming up is, does there need to be some kind of knows that stuff better than anybody. We talked about it at CAOA. There is a requirement now that airports are considered a matter of state interest. It's called 1041, which is the name of the bill that did that said local jurisdictions are supposed to consider their airport when they're making land use decisions. The problem is a lot of them aren't doing it. A lot of the jurisdictions that are making bad land use decisions are not airport sponsors, so they don't have an assurance. And again, I'm looking at Dave. El Paso County is not an airport sponsor. So when El Paso County makes an unfortunate land use decision that impacts the Meadow Lake Airport, El Paso County doesn't have the things that we're going to talk about. Some states, the airports or the Aeronautics division does land use reviews. That costs money. That takes extra people. That's money that would come away from the grant program. But we're wide open to any ideas that you all might have to move forward. CIO would come in if you think there's a need to do something different with land use here. The struggles are, if you look at California, there's a requirement that Caltrans looks at airport land use. Guess what? No jurisdiction listens to Caltrans reactions to do your question, Stacy, but it's something that probably needs to be discussed on a broader airport level about what we might do with state statute.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be some state involvement, because if you leave it up to the municipalities to do it, I think it's a perfect place for the state to step in and help us.
So, yes, sir, back there.
Yeah, I just want to expand on what she's saying, because all airports in the same boat. That course you're talking about, 1041 is what you got to think about. And then I could let the mayors and officials at least do it. It could be a stage/FAA thing. So at least they're aware of some of the hazards they're going to get involved in if they have a community that's very pro-airport, but still they're not entirely sure, can I put a community over here, or should I not? And I think that would be one of the first courses that, even if it's a video, like a short documentary like here.
Land use is part of that.
And
At least
I
as
think
one
even
step.
when you educate them, which I had to take the process to do that, to try to protect some industrial land, and I got through with a 4-3 vote, but I mean, you know, barely. And then they come, people come into the podium saying, you know, we bought this land, we want to build the way we want to, and then the elected official feels compelled to go with. So I just, it's even if they understand it, they still feel very Colorado. They don't want to tell people what to do with their land, especially on the western slope. And so I just think it's a perfect place for where the state can step in and at least provide some guidance. At least have something for the airport managers to reference. They don't listen to, at least we have something we can point to. Right now, it's just us standing up saying, you know, as the airport sponsor, you're supposed to protect your land. And what more can you say?
So
Yeah.
I'll put a shameless plug in there from the federal side. I know, I hear Stacy on, there's a lot of people pulling from one side what they want to use their land for, what the others. If your city, your county, your authority has the ability, contractually, you've signed your bill for the airport. That's the place where I see we get tripped up the most, is right in our own backyard. I'd be more than happy to help you. We can bring in Mike and John as well. More than happy to come up, meet with your elected officials. You know, there's a contract in place with the United States government that we will do these as a sponsoring community. So I know some people here and say, yeah, but that doesn't matter. When the grant funds start to be recalled back, when there are repayments of things, when it starts to paint a different picture. Now, when you get to the communities that are not a part of your contract, again, the requirement is try to get as much information out there. We'd be more than happy to help you again. We realize that a zoning authority only goes so for XYZ. We can show, you know, numerous places where RPZs have not been protected and aircraft have gone down. You know, so again, we can't mandate a different county change how they zone, but we can at least compatible. Are these something that might work for your community? But I will stress, as everyone here in this room knows, it's vital to protect the space around the airports, but we need to ensure that by their federal contract.
Mark, I think the difficult thing is, and you mentioned, somebody mentioned El Paso County, it's the same way in Morgan County. The land around it is not in our jurisdiction, and that's the piece that we struggle with. We just had this conversation. Challenge. So having you all at that table as we have these conversations will be huge. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
We'll bring you in.
So that's a tough nut. Again, you know, before I came to the division, I spent a lot of years as an airport manager, but right before I came here, I spent 3.5 years in 7 northwestern states, including Colorado. And one of the states that had a big deal when I was with AOPA with land use was Idaho. Can you think of any other state in the country that would be more local control, owner-centric, less state government, less federal government than Idaho? They created a requirement. Every municipality municipality was required by other state statute to have a comprehensive plan. Whether you were a county or a city, whatever, you had to have a comp plan. They just simply passed a rule, a state law that said if you have a comp plan and you have an airport in your area of planning authority, you need to take into account the solution. The realtors, I mean, there's so many parties to this. It's realtors, it's developers, it's the feds, it's your local government, it's landowners, it's zoning
Then
authorities.
they have somewhere to go to.
Really complicated. So again, I, as a state employee, cannot go to the legislature and say, this is the solution I think you should do. I can say we have a problem. Pilots Group, they have a different name, I can't think of what it is. It's not just Idaho Pilots Association. And together they got that bill passed in a state that is the least likely in the West that you would think to have state level land use control. So I would throw that out there. So anyway, just throwing that out there. I'm looking at Jason and Dave from CIOA, but that might be something that a CIOA runs with and says we think we have an opportunity that I can stand up and say, your proposal, this is what it would mean to the division. So I at night, an engine quit. Landed in a field about 2 miles north of the airport. Today that field is full of homes. I got to tell you what, land use hits me personally very, very hard. And because if that field was full of homes, I might not be here, So it means a lot to me. My pitch to you, if there's no more questions about land use so we can keep on track, let's take a quick 15-minute break. Let's come back at like 10:25 or 10:30. And Mark, can regale us with all your cool stuff.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Well, thank you. This is always a cool time of the year that we can all get together. I like to use this opportunity to reflect on what really turned out to be a really good fiscal year 19, but it also gives us an opportunity to look forward to fiscal year 2020 that we're in right now. Give you a little bit of background. Fiscal year 19 for us that I wrapped up here at the end of September. As an office, we issued 88 grants total last year. Just over $184 million of federal funds that came out of our office this past year. Second highest grant total in a fiscal year that I've seen in my 18 years here. Second only to back in 2009 with the stimulus projects being included. So thank you guys for having good, solid CIPs in place, putting money to use where it needs to. Something that's really unique about our office, but specifically here in the state of Colorado, in conjunction with Dave and Todd and the planners from CDOT, we collectively manage probably one of the most robust transfer agreement systems across the country. We do it through all three of our states, but here in Colorado specifically with the transfer groups that have set up through the CIP. It really helps enable us to get funding where it needs to be in a timely manner to make those projects happen. What is unique about the way our funding comes is that if you get your entitlements, whether it's your primary entitlements or your non-primary $150,000, that's great. That comes to your airport. It's available for that year. If you don't have a project or aren't planning on using it, the typical process is, okay, we'll carry those funds over. We'll send them back to FAA. They'll do some fancy keystrokes and we'll save it for the next fiscal year. What that money does then is when it's carried over, it actually gets reallocated still that fiscal year as a discretionary from a headquarters level. So, John, how much we get? Roughly 11%.
11% back.
As a region, we get 11%. So, you turn $150,000 back in. Okay, that's great. We'll secure it for you for next year, which we do. But that money gets repurposed. Northwest Mountain gets 11% of that $150,000. Northwest Mountain is made up of 7 states. So now we're 1/7 of that 11% goes back into the state of Colorado. So just want to extend our appreciation for your willingness to help your local airports by, instead of transferring 150,000, or instead of carrying over 150,000, if you can transfer between a neighboring airport, all 150,000 for this example stays right here in the state of Colorado. Next year they transfer back. None of that got drained or lost through the carryover process. So as you work on CIPs, and John will touch on this a little bit more a little bit later here this morning, it's just a phenomenal way to ensure that we're putting all of our Colorado entitlements to the highest and best use year after year. So I thank you for those. Timing-wise, in fiscal year 20, as many of you know, we have our 5-year bill passed for the authorization. So that's kind of cool to have that checked off and sitting in our back pocket. We always run on 2 tracks, though. We have the authorization and then the appropriation of funding. So our current appropriation is up through November 21st. That's okay by us. As long as we have the authorization, that's always the big key for us to kind of stay in business and keep working. We'll wait as we get closer to November. We'll see if that appropriation can be, it'll most likely be extended, or hopefully for us it'd be extended through the end of the fiscal year. So I don't have any big concerns about will we be able to come in and work or not. With the authorization in place, we're pretty secure that we'll be able to work throughout the fiscal year. It's just timing of when the grants will come are tied through the appropriation. Many of you have probably already had sit-down discussions with your project managers from our office for your 2020 projects. If you haven't heard it then, you'll hear it now. Schedule is just absolutely critical to us. We're going to be looking to get our projects designed, out the door, bid, so that we can be as flexible as we can when funding becomes available, probably in the spring timeframe, that we can get these projects off and running. One of those things that you'll hear, and we've talked about it year after year up here, is a January 15th. A January 15th was always our target goal deadline for submitting your environmental documentation to our office. We have an absolutely phenomenal environmental specialist, Candace. She does an amazing job. We issued 88 projects last year. She had her fingers on every one of those from an environmental review. So, think about it in these terms. We actually started the year with potentially 92 projects that we had identified that needed to have environmental done for the entire office. 53 of those, thankfully, were able to be categorically excluded through the memo process we have within our office. So good that got us down, but that left us 39 as an office. Again, stressing on schedule. Of those 39 that had CAT X's or environmental assessments still needing to be completed, 9 of those were submitted by January 15th as our office. 23% of the program of the remaining grants that needed clearance were behind schedule. What that resulted in, honestly, is if it's not by January, maybe it's in May, maybe it's in June, and everyone's got kind of a one-off explanation, but we really need to, because it absolutely buried our office and Candace and her ability to coordinate with SHPO, for example. There are other lead times than just once we get it, we can sign off on it. There are other pieces that we need to ensure are at least touched on to meet that time frame. Some of our grants ultimately actually did not get issued this year because they ran too late in the year. So January 15th, have your environmental in. Hopefully you've had some of your pre-designs already. I know getting out and doing some of the survey, some of the geotech, those type of things, we're trying to meet earlier and earlier so we can get those accomplished in the fall timeframe before the ground freezes, before snow starts falling, and we're already into spring. If you have anything that's going to slip, any hurdles you're coming up against, let John know, let Mike and Ron, let Candace know as soon as possible, so at least we can start to formulate, okay, what does our new path look like if we can't meet this date? Because really, what it resulted in, and each one kind of got there on their own path, but we, at the end of the year, we've got a process that we've got to go through to get our grants out. And it means we're having fees approved, plans approved, on the street, bids open. We've got environmental documentation we'll talk about. We've got just the grant application itself, asking for money. We're not able to give money we haven't at least had a request for. All of these things led to, we had 15 grants within our office that we were able to issue on September 20th, really the last week of our fiscal year. Thankfully, we were able to have good communication with our sponsors. I know that puts several of you in a bind of, well, our city council doesn't meet until now we're on September 29th. And you guys are telling us you are going to give us the grant on the 20th and you need it back by the 23rd. Special city council meetings, draft reports, a lot of things that could have gone wrong. That was almost 20% of our grant program went out the last week of the fiscal year. That doesn't make anybody feel good, because sooner or later one of those is going to drop through and not be able to take a grant. Outside of the fact, it puts a lot of your construction schedules just gone. This year was lost for some. We've got contractors that maybe aren't willing to hold their bids until spring, because that's not how it was bid to them originally. So you'll hear a lot from us about getting on your projects early. We're on that same commitment. We're going to do what we can. Let us know if you see areas where we can enhance. We're trying to turn that dial, just rotate the entire clock at least a couple months back. Give ourselves time for the one-offs that pop up, something's identified through the environmental process that needs additional coordination or site survey. We've had a couple that were good this year. We had bids open timely, no bidders. Gave us an opportunity to go back, reevaluate, maybe redesign a little bit, repackage, re-advertise, and still get bidders on board the same fiscal year, so we didn't lose the project completely. So a lot of good successes this year. I know with the reauthorization there are some changes that are coming, and I think Ron and Mike and John have a couple things that they can add. Open book for us. If you got any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or these guys standing over here. We'll be able to answer some questions. One I can't answer, and I'll just tell you this right now. You know as much as I do on when the fiscal year 19 supplemental funding will be announced. So it's a joke kind of within our office, and not in a haha way, but just I mean this from the bottom of my heart. The fastest way to ensure you don't get any additional supplemental funding is to find out ahead of time that you're supposed to get supplemental funding. It's as straightforward as we can be. When we know something, we'll let you know. So I appreciate. I can give you a little bit of background on the supplemental funding that has been released already, though. Under fiscal year 18 supplemental, we ended up with 4 projects: Leadville, Alamosa, Eagle, and Ray, totaling almost $27 million of additional federal funds towards those projects. That's huge for us. That opens up not only good timing for good projects at those locations, we've got a backlog, as so to see it. I mean, we could spend the next 10 years worth of project requests in this fiscal year alone. So it creates a backlog. We start to bring some more projects up, just really putting money to where it needs to be. I always like telling this stat because it's fun. So almost $27 million for Colorado. All right, that's good. I mean, it was $1 billion, but 27 million, works well for us. California, the entire state of California, 18.2 million. Texas. Big Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas. Not their supplemental funding. 23.6. So that really is a testament to you all on, again, having your projects with good scope, concise work, reasonable cost estimates, being able to give something tangible that with your applications could be reviewed, evaluated, and like I said, for us, very fortunate to get almost $27 million of additional funding in there. So as we hear more going forward, we'll let you know. But until then, I think these guys have some good updates for you on kind of what 2020 looks like from the construction side of things. Come on up. You don't want me talking about this.
Okay. At the end of the fiscal year, we always get updates on our advisory circulars. So these are some that have been recently published. 5316B is on packs and facts. So when you do your AGIS, there's some new information on how to do your packs and facts. The next one is 5319, a airport data and information system. That's just how we want to see your data, and when you put it into what used to be the AGIS program is now called the Airport Data Information Portal. So that's how you'll be putting that information in.
Tell Sean to move the mouse.
Sean, what's that?
You broke it.
He doesn't have control.
Oh, I did it.
That won't be on the video.
Okay, 534528, that's PAPI specs. They made some changes into how the PAPI specs have been written. 5342J talks about light bases for your light systems. So there's some revisions in that. And then on 537010H, there was an errata sheet put out. Be sure and look at the errata sheet when you're working your specs, because it has changed some of the specs that may save you from doing a mod to standard on it, if it's already covered by the errata sheet. Some that we have soon to be released, 5113C, that's on the development of stage specs. 5314D shows de-icing facilities. 521025A is runway incursion warning systems. And 5313B, there will be a change to the airport design advisory circular. They're hoping that those can be released before the end of the calendar year, but they're not guaranteed because they're still going through headquarters review and legal reviews on those. And then next one, Mike. Ones that we've got coming up that we know for sure doesn't have a number yet, but it discusses filing of the notice of construction in the OE AAA program. And it will detail pretty much on if you're filing for buildings, or if you're filing for fences, or if you're filing for construction sites, what is required and how many points and the information that's required for when you file in the OE AAA case. The next big information is our mod to standards tool. And if anybody went through the MOS tool with us this last year, it tended to be a little bit painful for us.
And that includes us.
That includes us, yeah. So up front it says the Airport Data and Information Program. That is what used to be the HIS. It's now including several different modules, and so they changed the name of it. It's not just graphic information, but it's data information. Our mods follow 5101F, and that's the agency's modification standards for design, construction, and equipment. We are expecting revisions to the MOS tool. It is in process of being tested right now. It should be out for your guys' review or use by the middle of November is what they're hoping. Most of those mods are going to be internal use on it. They're going to allow us as the agency to add documents. As of right now, if you guys didn't submit enough document or backup information, we had to basically send the mods back down the line and have you guys add some extra information and then start the process again. We are now, the ADO is now going to be able to add some documents once it gets to our office. It's also going to allow us to review it, and if under agreement we decide the mod is absolutely not required, we can terminate the mod instead of sending it back down to the sponsor for termination. There's a few other small issues that are in there. A lot of it is in how the information is presented and whatnot. So on our design mods, the general process is you will submit the mods, or the sponsor submits the mods to us. We will review it, accept it. It goes to region. Region reviews and accepts it. It goes to headquarters. Headquarters reviews and accepts it. And then it goes back down to region, and then back down to the ADO, and then back down to the sponsor. At each of these processes, there is a 30-day allowed review period. So once we see the mod come to our office, we need to look at it and get it processed within 30 days. Goes to region, they've got another 30 days to look at it. Goes to headquarters, they've got another 30 days to look at it. And then it trickles back down. Doesn't mean that we're all going to take 30 days, but that's what the policy allows us to do. So at any point in time, if, as we go on down, is if we reject it, then it goes back to the sponsor right away. If we accept it, it goes to the region can reject it, and then it trickles back down. And the same way with headquarters. Headquarters can review it and reject it. It trickles back down through the region, through the ADO, and the sponsor to get maybe more justification, maybe better explanation as to why you need it, or maybe you terminate the mod at that point in time.
I'll say real quick, so if you've got a mod that you know is kind of a one-off, it's very unique, it's something you really haven't done on most of your projects, I'd encourage you to work with your project managers, bring in Cindy from the region, because we know it's going to have to go through at least the region on these kind of unique modifications, probably headquarters. Let's see if there's an opportunity for us to work outside of the tool system itself up front. Figure out where those bugs are, where's some language that needs to be strengthened, what is extra data that we don't need, what are we missing. We can do those so much faster through an email or a conference call. Get the basis molded so that when we put it into the system, that review process, instead of the 30 days of, okay, what am I looking at? It's already familiar. Cindy already knows it's coming. So we make sure that what we talked about is submitted. She sees it, does a quick check, and then it's on to headquarters. That will help you speed up, like Ron said, if you send it to us through the system, we make comments, we have to send it back through the system, back down. You send it back up with some changes, and we say, yep, you made 7 of 10, but we need those last 3. And it's just this back and forth process that's going to cost your project just time. Yes, sir.
Would you mind just sharing an example of a mod that might go through nicely and one that might get rejected, just for an illustration?
If it looks exactly like the federal specification, we'll use that one first. No, I'll say, well, I was going to say, as the gatekeeper for our office, I have over 200 modifications lined up in my queue from this last year. A lot of things that have been rejected tend to be, and I think you're going to mention this here on the next slide, so I'll jump ahead. I apologize. It's the depth of what your justification is. Somewhere, well, this is what we've done on the last 3 projects here. Okay, great. We can start from that base, but why has it been successful the last 3 years? What is preventing from still meeting a good product with the existing spec? What makes this request unique and a must-have for our project? There's some I've seen where I think of it like our going through the SMS process. that if you've got a panel reviewing, safety for taking down the runway, like we did at Centennial for their maintenance project. I guess it was maintenance. It was a rehab at that point. But we sat down with the tower and we went through all these lists of things, and we figured out, where the safety concerns were. I think of it very similar for the Mod Standards tool. I've seen somewhere it says, well, in the past, if this goes wrong, we've seen we have to have some extra coordination with the contractor, and it takes more time. It's okay. I acknowledge that. One of the hardest ones we've had, though, is can the FAA specification, can it be completed on this project as is? And the answer is yes, but this gives us a little bit more strength down the road. Where we're finding a lot of a pushback is, so the standard can be met, and you have, whether it's change order, whether it's liquidated damage, you have a process within the field to address these things as they come up. It's just easier to have it up front. Is not one of those that we've typically seen be approved as a modification. So a lot of kind of the historical nuance of, in a perfect world, this will be a catch-all for everything that we don't know is going to happen, but maybe if it does, we're covered. The agency's really pulled back to more of a standard of, this is the standard. If something goes wrong, we've got policy and procedures to address it, and that's the way we go. Really, it's the ones, though, that have sketches, have the change highlighted, have the new verbiage or the strike-through verbiage, whatever modification you're making. If you can, again, make it as clear as day for those reviewing to say, here's what is in 10H, here's what our changes for the proposal. That will help. The other thing you'll see, and I think, I'm stealing the back half of your presentation. The other thing I've seen is really going from if the federal specification is not the one that you're intending to use and it won't work for your project, what are other specifications that maybe have gone through a standardized process? Is it a state specification? Is there some other credence to what we're proposing has already been through a test or a review process? Those are also coming through a little bit quicker, a little bit more seamlessly. Where this is the state spec, and this is how it correlates back to the FAA standard. Tie it to something that has a certification to it, as opposed to while it could be very good and useful information, something that was your own brainchild. Again, not saying it's not valid. It just will take a little bit longer for us to vet. Okay, is this the right choice for our project? A state spec, for example, is the next logical step down to say, okay, if it's not the federal one, let's use something else that's already been through the testing process.
So the last bullet here is design. If we do a design modification, and a design modification is such as maybe it's line of sight, maybe it's the geometry, or something in the design, those modifications are only good for 5 years, and they have to be renewed after 5 years. So with a sponsor, you need to kind of keep that in mind as you go through it. Mike, hit the next slide. If we go to construction mods are only good through the duration of that construction project. And even though you've got an approved mod on this project, doesn't mean it's automatically approved for the next project. It still has to be submitted as a mod for each project. Now, we have gotten the option of, if we've approved a modification on project A, and you submit it on project B, if you haven't changed that specification, then we can approve it locally. It doesn't have to go to region. But if you change it, if you add an extra paragraph, if you take something out, if you change references to ASTMs or something, then it's got to go back through the process up through region again.
Yeah, and if it's something that we've approved, that's great. We can absolutely use it going forward. If it fits for that project, it still needs to be resubmitted through the tool.
Yeah.
One of the easiest things to do at that point, though, is along with the supporting documentation. So we can't just say, was approved under project such and such 2019. We still need to have, because it's going to be a standalone modification for itself, the fact that we've got an approved version of it prior to helps us with our approval of it from the timeliness. We still need to submit the supporting documentation because each one is going to be linked with that specific project.
Yeah. So, like I said, on the bottom line, if we've approved them previously, it makes it easier for us. But one thing that was brought up very specifically through headquarters is if you have a modification that was approved in a different region, it does not automatically gain approval in the Northwest Mountain or any other region. So just because Central Region approved a mod doesn't mean it's approved in the Northwest region.
It's all case by case.
Yeah. Some of the things that we've learned is we got to submit them early, because when we look at that 30-day window between each of the regions or each of ADO and region and whatnot, it eats up a lot of time. I think most of us are asking you to get your mod submitted when your plans are at 75%. That starts us the earlier process to see where we're going with it. Specifications, yeah, why is the specification needed? Is it needed to meet local condition or something else? Be specific at it. And the term, we've always done it this way, or ADO approved this last year, that got our hands slapped as bad as we've been going down the hill with yours. They're going, why did you approve this last year? It doesn't make sense. Well, we think it did make sense, and so we approved it last year, but now with the new system, it doesn't work. If you're changing a whole paragraph, or if you're changing a sentence in a paragraph, it is so much easier for us to see that sentence highlighted, or however much of that paragraph, even though you submit the whole paragraph, we have to go back and read it line for line and compare it against the standard. And then we got to try to explain it to region what exactly changed. So when you're submitting them in the MOS tool, highlight the piece of the paragraph that is changed.
Just to piggyback a little bit on what Ron is also mentioning, I know some big specs that we don't have specs for that have gone through, things like apron tie-down anchors, watering. I know there's some other ones that we've had go through that are pretty commonly used, but we just don't have specs for. Just communicate with us if you want to potentially use one of those. Ask us if we have one already approved, so that we can run it through just our office and use it on your project. So.
Well, it sounds slow, which it is, and somewhat redundant, which it also is, which is how we work. I know for the tie-down, this is an easy one for us to go. How can we administer all these airfield construction grants and not have a standard FAA specification for a tie-down? Completely understand, we own it. Without the mods themselves coming in on each one of the projects to say, hey, we need one for a tie-down, headquarters will be using this process through the mod standards tool to identify what changes to the overall federal spec need to change going forward. So if we always just, whether it's approve it locally, not even have a mod standard for a tie-down and just say, well, just go ahead and show it on your plan set, that information is not being cataloged through our system to say, wow, I thought this was a 1 or 2 off. Turns out we got 938 of these mods last year. We should probably come up with a standard specification going forward. But if we don't put the mod in, they have no way to validate, again, where they need to spend their focus on with the next update.
The last bullet item, go back.
Well, you're fast.
The last bullet item I got here is, and Mark was making reference to it, if you're using a mod or information from a different agency, such as if you're using CDOT specifications, what we've heard from region is list that specification out completely. Colorado Department of Transportation Road and Bridge specification, 2017 version, and here what it is. They don't want to see CDOT Section 10. Yeah. So, an idiosyncrasy from their read, but they want to see that. So look, just kind of list that out specifically.
I think it is, and I'll be getting a little bit smoother though. Like I said, we'll be able to get some of the low-hanging fruit, the ones that we have year in and year out on our projects. We identify, work with Cindy in the region, what kind of standard language will be accepted. Those ones we can submit. Ron and Mike, I can approve them there locally, and it's just part of our standard process going forward. Unfortunately, with a new system being stood up, everything is new, so it's got the scrutiny on every one of the mods that's coming in. I do believe that it will be streamlined. We'll still have the process, but should be a lot easier. Really using the tool, going all the way up to headquarters for that one or two specific mod that just, you can't have your project without it.
One quick thing that's not on the slide is everybody who has access to the ADIP program, the airport data information, will have access to read your mods. So that could be people in ATO, could be people in flight standards, could be people, facility. So use as good a language as you can and as complete. Don't be brief. Don't abbreviate your answers and your reasons. Be very specific of why we need it. Any questions? Please, no questions. All right, let's go on. The next big one is our DDE goals. So if we have a lot of new airport managers this year, and Sonia Cruz, who is our DDE liaison or officer in California, needs to know when the liaison officer is changed for your airport. So if you got new airport managers or if you get a new liaison officer, please contact Sonia Cruz and let her know. She will want you to update the program. I don't know exactly what all that entails. It may be just simply changing the cover letter that says, here's your DVE, but please notify her and let her know, again, as soon as possible. If we have any projects that are coming up in 2020 that were not already included in your DBE goals that have been approved, we've got to go back through the approval process for that individual project. So the goals are approved triennially. Right now we've got 18, 19, and 20 projects approved. We will have to go through the whole triennial process again as of August of 2020. So coming up at the fall of this fiscal year, you will be asked to resubmit your goals for the next 3 years. So it shows here that non-primary and G airports are August of 20. Non-hub primary airports are August of 21. Small hub airports are August of 20. And large and medium hubs, again, are August of 22. That's the calendar that Civil Rights has set up for submitting your goals.
I have a dumb question. Can you send out these PowerPoint slides with all these dates on it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It'll also be on the video.
Yeah.
In case you want to watch this.
Okay, what's next, Mike?
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the AIP handbook a little bit. Just before I get into that, I'll want to bring up one thing from the new 10H specs that's kind of come up. In our general provisions, we do have a cap
louder, Mike.
Okay, we have a cap on mobilization now at 10% of the project costs. However, there is a caveat to that. So that number is bracketed in our specs, meaning that the consultant, the sponsor, can adjust that. So you could go over 10%. So if you have a project that's in a very rural area or has very specific equipment, maybe that is going to cause mobilization to go over 10%, we can put that in the specs. We just have to itemize and have a justification over 10%. So a contractor would have to submit a document saying, here's our cost, here's why mobilization was over 10%. We needed this equipment, here's the rental rates, that kind of thing. So maybe this is something we bring up at pre-bids in the future, and it's just kind of a lesson learned moving forward. So I'll get to the handbook now. I think most of you have at least looked at the handbook. So it's really a combination of AIP legislation, some policies and procedures that the FAA has. It's kind of our Bible. It's what tells us what projects we can fund, what we can't fund, some roles and responsibilities for sponsors, for the ADO, kind of everyone involved in these projects. So in February, we had Change 1 come out. There was a lot of changes, so over 800, in fact. And we had over 500 substantial changes. And although substantial, it can mean a lot of different things. Sometimes it's a slightly different policy change. It might be a clarification. It might be a little bit a change of how a sentence is worded. So, last fiscal year, a lot of our projects, we didn't really run into a lot of these changes because a lot of the projects got started before this Change 1 came out. So we really held the sponsor and the consultant to the previous version. We weren't going to make them switch, halfway through the project. So I think this year this is going to impact us a lot more moving forward. So Change 1 kind of included 2 large key items. One is 2 CFR 200. That's the Code of Federal Regulations. That is really a document that tells any agency that accepts federal money how they have its procurement rules for that federal money. So those changes were brought in, and also 4 years of stakeholder feedback. So we had airports, we had FAA personnel, we had consultants all weigh in over this time period of 4 years. And those have all gone into Change 1. So they also deleted a lot of things. We got rid of some appendices, some references that just kind of bogged down the document. It's still over 500 pages. It's very long, but it's a little shorter than it was. So I don't know if you guys are aware too, we have program guidance letters that are almost an amendment, I would say, to our circulars and to our AIP handbook. They're numbered based on the calendar year, and then there's a counter number afterwards. So PGL, we call them PIGLs. 1601 came out in 2016, so it'd be the first program guidance letter in 16. So Change 1 goes all the way up to 1601. We have additional PIGLs that have come out after that. So there are changes in the handbook that we have guidance letters that override those changes in the handbook. So just wanted you guys to be aware of that. So there are some key items that we've come out, some PIGLs that are important, that do supersede the handbook. So PIGL 1902 talks about LED lighting. Specifically, high intensity runway edge lighting, so for LEDs. LED approach lighting, LED obstruction lighting. If you look at Change 1, it'll say all of those are not AIP eligible. But if you read that PIGL, it talks about how there was concern about some of the navigation instruments that use night vision that pick up the IR from the lights. There was concern initially that the intensity of those LED lights might not be picked up with the night vision capabilities. So PIGL 1902 has reversed that ineligibility of those LED lights. So that's something that you have to read that PIGL to find that out. If you look at Change 1, it'll say they're not eligible, however they actually are. Change 1 also does not include the Reauthorization Act of 2018 that we talked about a little bit earlier. So that's kind of Congress's 5-year vision for the FAA. There's also some important things in that Reauthorization Act. Specific WAS 3s, there's a few changes to some of the eligibility pieces to that. So if you have an AWAS project, just come talk to us. We'll kind of guide you in the right direction. The reauthorization also has some funding categories that are different than what you'll see in Change 1. For instance, we have that new special category where if you're between 8,000 and 10,000 employments, you get $600,000. There's also a special category that I know at least one airport's in that if you had over 10,000 enplanements in 2012, and in the previous calendar year, you had any scheduled service, you get your passenger entitlement. So if you dip below, say you dip below 10,000, but you had 10,000 in 2012 for fiscal years 18, 19, 20, as long as you had scheduled service, it can only be one flight, if that's what it is. In the previous calendar year, you get passenger entitlement. So that's a big deal. So since we didn't capture the Reauthorization Act in Change 1, we're going to be issuing some RPGLs. So we'll look for those in the future to kind of provide some guidance after we digest all the stuff that was in that Reauthorization Act. Next slide. So we have all these changes. I would highly advise, projects that are upcoming this year to look at them and make sure that you understand some of the changes that may have come up. I'm just going to run through some of the ones that I thought were notable. Again, there was over 500, so there's quite a few. ARF buildings, really there's just a clarification on some of the areas inside ARF buildings that are eligible and some of the components. Access roads, there's some clarification about the access road has to be on airport property. It has to serve an aviation component of the airport. Non-aircraft fueling facilities are specifically called out as ineligible. So that'd be, fueling facility maybe that you use for vehicles, passenger vehicles, things like that on the airport equipment. Fuel farms. So fuel farms, we can only construct one fuel farm at a GA airport, and it has to be using non-primary entitlements. There are a few upgrades that we can do to fuel farms. So if you do have a fuel farm project, come talk to us again. We'll go through those kind of case by case. Terminal buildings, kind of a similar situation to the ARF. There's some clarification. There's some additional areas that are eligible, some that are ineligible. Closed circuit TV cameras outside the terminal are now eligible. There's just some kind of small things. Parking lots, we've called out parking garages as ineligible. Parking lots have to serve passengers in order to be eligible. Kind of one of the bigger ones that came up was pavement in front of ineligible buildings. So looking at aprons, taxi lanes, you have a private hangar. There's a 50-foot offset now that is ineligible, which is a big deal. Previously, it was based on kind of the critical aircraft, the TDG that it was in. I think it was, for TDG-1, I think it was 27 feet. I think it was 40 for TDG-2. So now it's just a flat 50 feet. So that's something we'll have to discuss too for apron projects and taxi lanes especially. SRE buildings, again, talk about specific areas. We just got a little more detail on those. AWOS, there's a provision now where you can't bid an AWOS 1 or 2 as being upgradable, specifically upgradable for 3. If someone does bid the project as an upgradable, that's okay. We just can't specify that in the specs, and that's just so we're not limiting competition, because not every AWOS is upgradable. There's just some details on specific vehicles, things that we've traditionally viewed as being ineligible anyway, passenger vehicles. I think they call out motor graders, lawnmowers, a few other things. Fencing is kind of a big one. So at GAs, we do require a wildlife hazard assessment before we can do wildlife fencing. So that's something we'll have to look at, maybe trying to do that the year before to try to get that knocked out beforehand. And kind of spoke about the LED lighting a little bit. Again, we can discuss that too, case by case as needed. So. Switching gears a little bit, we'll talk about Delphi. We just had a couple things we wanted to bring up just to make this process a little smoother. We would really like to see regular payments as often as is practical. So, if you guys get invoices, don't feel like you have to sit on 5 of them to submit an RFR. Just go ahead and, as they come, submit them to us. And what that does is it shows the region and headquarters that, we've got projects that are moving, the contractor's doing the work or the consultant's doing the design, and they're getting paid for it. They're invoicing and paying for it. So it just shows that our projects are moving. We have a 10-month kind of internal inactive list that we look at. So if a payment hasn't been made in 10 months, it pops up internally, and Mark looks at us and kind of points his finger and kind of says, what's going on with this? Why haven't you made a payment? We understand winter shutdowns, there's not going to be payments made, there's no work. But other than that, just please try to submit regular payments. So authorized users, we've had just a couple instances where folks may have left the airport and other folks that are still there are using their login, and then they get locked out, and then they're having troubles getting back in and getting it comes to light that they're using someone else's login, and it just becomes a huge hassle. So it's pretty easy to get a login. If you guys just contact our office, our admin officer, Delilah, is great about getting those put in. So I think you just need name, email, kind of your position, phone number, just really basic information, and she'll work on getting you a login.
Question?
Yep.
Do you have a process for a quicker deauthorization of formerly authorized users?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure how that works on that side. I've never actually kicked someone out of the system. I don't have the power to do that, but Mark might be able to speak to you.
Well, it still goes through our office, Tom. So send it into your project manager or straight to Delilah. Again, she can't physically remove them, but she can put in the help desk request to basically say that this party is no longer associated within their current role, and we'd like them taken off the account.
Required documentation. I know the vast majority of you all are nominal risk, so what that means is when you guys submit an RFR, like if you just want an invoice, all you're required to submit is a summary sheet. So you have to just list a summary of all the invoices that you are seeking reimbursement for. However, some sponsors choose to still put the invoice attached, which is fine. We will review those. We just ask that you guys just make sure all the numbers match. Sometimes we'll see rounding differences. We might see the summary sheet total everything out and round it differently than maybe what's on the invoices. So just keep an eye on that. We do track pennies for audit reasons, which is a huge pain. So kind of brings me to the last point is rejected payments. Usually it's just a rounding error. Since all of our pennies have to match up and our grants have to add up to an even dollar amount. If we do reject a payment, we have a method of just putting a quick comment in. I always call the sponsor and just let them know, hey, we had to reject this, just make this quick change, and we're good. So with that, that's all I got on Delphi. I think we've got 5010
Let me add one thing on rejected payments. So if you do get a rejected payment, you have to resubmit everything that was submitted with the first payment. So in other words, if you're including all the invoices and documentation, you have to resubmit them with the second payment. Don't just resubmit the cover page and the request, because all of that information is downloaded and stuck into our docket book. So we've got to be able to verify that, yeah, you were. If you're just submitting a summary page, make sure it's up to the estimated cost or the total cost.
Forgot to ask you, does anyone have any questions before we move on? I think we're going to talk about 5010 stuff next.
So as Ron mentioned, the former website known as Aegis is now ADIP, and there's also now a 5010 module to that. So that will give you guys, airport sponsors, access to essentially update your 5010 a little more in depth. There are some items that you won't be able to update, but that site went live within ADIP on September 23rd. So how many of you guys actually have an access into ADIP/Aegis? Okay. I would strongly recommend getting one of those as soon as possible because, like Ron said, the MOS tool is in there. Your AGIS data is obviously in there. If you have survey projects with a master plan or construction plan project, and now 5010, which will make it easier for you guys to update and add this stuff. So again, just go. All you have to do is request access. From my understanding and my work with them, it's pretty easy just to request access. And then once airport is in there, you will then be able to also assign different access levels for consultants helping you out with, whether it's an AGIS process or MOS. What is the website? FAA-ADIP, I think.
The best way to find it is do a Google search for FAA ADIP. It takes you.
ADIP.
Yeah,
Yes.
or AGIS. It still takes you the same place.
It's still, yep. Sorry, I don't know the website.
It still says yes in it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Once you book on it, you can't forget what the address is.
So, but that'll be a good, that'll be easier for you guys to maintain and update, airport information as opposed to going and emailing an NFDC like it used to be, or contacting your 5010 inspector or our office. A lot of this stuff you can just do directly now. And then kind of on those notes, I will make another plug to go in and get access and get it updated because there is a NIPIA snapshot that is going to be taking place on December 15th. And one of those things that they're going to be taking a really hard look at this year is based aircraft. So make sure your based aircraft through basedaircraft.com is updated and validated because that is going to be looked at in the NIPIA snapshot coming up in December. And I'll touch on that a little bit here in a little bit when we get into the CIP portion. But the NIPIA snapshot is very important for you guys to maintain getting your $150,000 a year. So as far as 5010 goes, maybe that's about it. Any questions on that? And then I think Bob and I will kind of segue into CIP stuff.
Are you guys good if we skip our break? The food is out there, and Caitlin is quietly hovering around it. Are you okay if we just power through this? The next part hopefully won't take very long. We have it scheduled 45 minutes. I think we'll be done by noon. Just please push us out of the way and go. Okay, so honestly, this is why we're all here. This is actually not going to take much time because nothing big has changed us on this this year. For the first time, I didn't change WIMS on you, so luckily there's no changes to that. So overall expectation, really, for the new ones, I'll be happy to kind of sit down with you individually, but how we have the CIP set up in WIMS is it's broken down into 3 periods. The near term, which is the first 5 years, so it's 2020 through 2024. The midterm is from 25 through 2029, and then the long term, 2030 and beyond. So the near term is where we want you to spend the most amount of your time. That's where we are really trying to get our money really fine-tuned. And again, those first 2 years, 2020, 2021, you will not be able to make changes at all in those without talking to us, and we actually have to make those changes for you within there. Right at the start of the meeting in WIMS, I opened everyone's CIP, so the CIPs are live at this point. And again, please spend most of your time on that first 5-year time period, and especially that 22 through 24 time period, because that is where we are really trying to get our money lined up as much as we can. And in that period, you can modify your local money, the state money, and the FAA money for those 3 years we're talking about. But we also want you to spend some time on that midterm and long term because we have some huge projects throughout the state, some very big $100 million projects at certain airports around the state that we need you to plug in your needs for those time periods so we can start working around your needs and the needs of those big projects. So for the midterm, you're able to modify your local amount and only the federal amount as well. Because how we've seen the division's future, again, Dave talked about it, our revenue source is based on oil. And so we are not comfortable looking further out than really that 5-year time period. So within that midterm, put in those federal requests, but at that point, we want you to show that you can have the full match. We are not gonna show our half of your match up to that 250 yet. You won't even be able to put that in there. So again, please plan on that. Your federal grant, accepting a federal grant says you have that local match. plan on it until we get closer into that period where we can start adding some state money in. So that's kind of, yeah, absolutely.
Remind me of the
Tom?
midterm again.
Midterm is 25 through 29.
Thank you.
And then in the long term, those are really your big needs that really don't have a time period yet. And honestly, you won't be able to update the state amount or the Fed amount for the projects. The big thing in there is going to be that project cost estimate and then how much local money you are going to be able to put toward that project. Because what's nice about WIMS is it tells us what that delta is, and then as we start getting closer to those projects, or we have a spot to put those projects in, we're able to put those in, and then we'll be able to see the need, no local money you're going to bring in. A big thing for us is the more local money you put into a project, the better it looks on the state, and honestly, the better it looks on the FAA side as well. So that's really the overall expectations for the WIMS process. Again, they are live as of right when we started this meeting this morning. If any of you, especially the new, make more insight on how WIMS works, what it looks like, be happy to do that kind of on an individual basis. But to make sure we all get some chicken this afternoon, I'll kind of leave it overall expectations, and I'll throw it over to John.
Kind of piggybacking on those overall expectations and nippy snapshot that I mentioned earlier. So for us, realistic CIP, right? If you're a GA airport that gets $150,000 a year, don't submit a CIP where you're anticipating $1 million of state apportionment or discretionary every year for the next 5 years, because that's not realistic, and that makes it really hard for us to manage the CIP and the system as a whole. So the $150,000 that the GA airports get every year, that's not set at $150,000. That is all based on what is reported to Congress as a need. And so we have to report $750,000 worth of need before we continue to get that. The way we are able to do that is what you guys submit to us in WIMS with good, realistic projects. If you're not giving us projects that are eligible or justified or needed, when that report to Congress goes, the end result is $150,000 a year, or you'll get some prorated share of that based on what the need was submitted.
Yeah, not a guarantee.
Those projects do not include planning projects, is that correct?
Correct. And so that's a little nuance that Congress has, and with the way it's done. Planning projects. If you do have a planning project in your 5-year CIP that's taking up 2 years of your entitlement funds, we'll typically backfill that with a need just to make sure that you guys continue to get your $150,000. But we do want to see that you guys actually have needs out there, and that's what's getting provided back to Congress, and you guys continue to get your $150,000 every year. And like I said, that's going to be happening in December. So in theory, since WIMS is just going open now, this is, the snapshot is going to be covered what you did last year. Keep that in mind as we go through this year and next year's those changes. So, and then kind of, I'll hit on the overall project timing real quick, and this kind of ties into what Mark was saying earlier too. So we have, as Todd mentioned, the 2021 is set. We don't want any. We do need and want those environmentals submitted by January 15th. We realize that there are delays in getting a grant through the process, whether it's us, whether it's you guys. But what the big thing that we like to do is eliminate our involvement in that delay. And the way we do that is having you guys submit the environmental to us January 15th, so that as soon as we're able to program the grant, we can program it. The large delay of until September, that was a problem that was well out of our office's control, well out of your control. But if we had been able to program those when we were able to right away, that wouldn't have happened. And the way we can program right away is having environmentals done. And so we can start programming your grants. Even though we know bids might not open and we do that, we can get through that process. And guess what? It's an election year already. And the situations and the hiccups and the problems that go back, I guess or idea on how long that's going to take or what curveballs they'll throw us this year. How we alleviate those curveballs is getting it programmed early and having the environmentals in. So I can't stress that enough. Get the environmentals in so we can program the grant. Time to hopefully we won't be in the same situation we were this year, getting 20% of our program out within a week. So let's see. Overall, that's project timing. The Exhibit A updates. That's another thing. Not necessarily there's a push from the agency to make sure that everybody has a very updated and accurate Exhibit A. There's some language in the reauthorization that is triggering, that look as far as what actually is airport property, what's owned, what's all that sort of stuff. And the way we get that is an Exhibit A. An Exhibit A is also required to be submitted with your application. So as we're going through and we're doing planning projects or construction projects with fences or something like that, let's take a good hard look at the Exhibit A's and let's start looking at that, maybe scoping it into a project where necessary or where it makes sense so that we can start tackling and getting ahead of these Exhibit A issues. I'm guessing if I ask the question, nobody's going to actually want to raise their hand. But I kind of know the answer that not everybody's Exhibit A is exactly how they think it is or is accurate. With the exception of maybe Tom, because I know they just spent a lot of money and a lot of time going through. And, they're a relatively new airport compared to a lot of you guys too. So we know it's a task, but it's something that we're going to be looking at and making sure that we have updated in the coming Exhibit A's. Overall, like Todd said, there's really not any changes to WIMS this year, which is good. We pull all of our data and feed from WIMS, so making sure that what you submit there is good. I don't have any other things really that I wanted to hit on. It was, again, project timing and making sure that we're hitting those deadlines so that we can get you guys the grants in a timely manner. Mark, I'll echo Mark's comment. That's something that we look at, every year to help minimize that, not only just from an overall program perspective, but how can we get the projects done as soon as possible and in a timely manner.
And you'll get a sneak peek of what that looks like to really understand what we're talking about, the transfer program at the end here.
Okay, technically not eligible. The project must be shown on the ALP. That's a good one because we're going through our CIP updates right now in Utah and Wyoming, and I've got 5 SRE projects in FY20. One of them is shown on the approved ALP. So now I'm left talking with the sponsors and figuring out how do we update your ALP between now and then? How do we do that? Because we can't technically fund a project. So having that ALP up to date is obviously very important. But yeah,
I know we've run into it.
Yes, and it's not just one state, not just one consultant, not just one airport. These are things that we're seeing everywhere. When you make sure it's shown on your ALP. And if it's not, then let's make sure that we're putting in a planning project to identify that need or some other mechanism to get it shown on the ALP. But
those conversations can't happen in these last 2 years. Otherwise, we're done. Exactly. That project just got pushed no matter what. You get to do a plan.
They're great. I think that was really all I had to say. Any other questions or comments on the overall CIP stuff, expectations as we get into WIM season?
So state and local projects, Dave talked about it a little bit earlier. So we kind of have two programs. We have our federal match program and then our state and local program. Dave talked about our federal match program. Again, it's half of your local match up to $250,000. That is going to be kind of the so as you're updating those CIPs, please don't expect more than that when you're putting in money for matching federal funding. And again, we talked about those what-if scenarios. If $250,000 doesn't cut it, please call us and have those conversations. But please use that throughout. I don't want to see a federal project where there's $450,000. Immediately cut that out. We had a conversation with the airport yesterday who started off our meeting saying, every year I submit a CIP that looks just amazing, looks great, and I get it back and it looks completely different. That's the reason. It's honestly realistic expectations that John talked about. Don't put in more money than we have on. Within our programs and procedures manual, we are sticking with a 90% state, 10% local match on those. And honestly, we have not put a whole lot of restrictions on that. We want to know what the needs of our airports are and where the state can actually fit in with that. So I talked about earlier how we're really spending most of our money right now on pavement maintenance, continue through honestly 2022 and 2023. But we do have some gaps in our funding where we think our funding will be. So if you have some needs in those 22, 23 time periods where you would see a good state and local project, please put that in your CIP update this year. We need to know that it will compete against all in some of those projects so we can start doing that prioritization within our office. But again, our board has complete discretion over that, and that's why we did not honestly put a cap on state and local projects. For instance, like a Grand Junction, we'll bring up Grand Junction specifically. They have a huge project going on to immensely that honestly isn't eligible for federal funding due to wind coverage. And so that's where we're able to pick up a project like that. And I'll say $3 million, we understand the importance of that runway. And so we have put that into our CIP because it won't get federal funds. Those federal funds used for other purposes. And so that's where we see a huge project there that we're able to do with our money instead of federal. So please come up with those ideas of where you see state funding fit in. And for that midterm, even though you can't put in state funds, put in a project, put in the estimate, say, hey, funds when this comes into the 5-year time period. Let us know you have those projects in that midterm so we can start having an idea if we'll have money to plan for those. Some of those could be GA terminals. Come up with good ideas of like, hey, we're going to bring $300,000 of local funding to this project. If you can bring more local funding, you throw towards local projects, the more desirable they're going to be for us to find a place to fit those in. Again, we want to help airports that want to help themselves. So that is really going to be a big thing for us. But state and local projects, again, Bryce talked about it earlier, we have money and we're so excited to be able to spend it again. We're tired of that Fed matching.
80 million wasn't good enough?
Ours barely plays with 80 million, so we're excited about those projects too. Any questions, state and local projects, before I go on to kind of what happens after they're submitted? So once you submit them, we sit down as a staff in our division offices. We go through CIP project by project for every airport, cleaning them, make sure that airports didn't put in $450,000 of federal match. Just check them. We'll clean that out immediately. But we do a very quick check just to make sure the CIP looks staff, John, all the project managers from their office, and we again go airport by airport, project by project. And that is where we are prioritizing every project statewide against each other, honestly. And so that is 3 days of hell to go through 60 airports. That happens where we are making those decisions. And so just so you guys understand, that is, you guys can submit a CIP that really makes sense for your airport, but we see it more on the statewide perspective, and that is why things move and things slide. So we will be doing that kind of the first part of December, I believe, is when we have that planned. CIPs will be due the 22nd of November. You'll see that here on the next slide, and also we have those key dates on every agenda as well, so you can see what those are. But go for it.
So one more thing that I kind of wanted, that I forgot to mention earlier, is the supplementals that we did very well not only in Colorado, but we did well in Utah and Wyoming. I mean, that was largely based on having a good, solid CIP. That 2018 process, or that $1 billion, you know, had the stipulations of the GAs got 100% match, had to have separate applications and stuff. So that money's gone and done. But the 2019 that Mark alluded to, that we don't know when is coming, that was another $500 million. That process is different than that original 18. It's going to, from what we can tell and what we're seeing, it's going to be more a good solid CIP with those needs and stuff, so that when we have these opportunities to go after that $500 million or whatever ends up getting appropriated in FY20, that we have projects that we can pull forward, that we know the situation, whether the local when we get asked to do those projects, the first stop that we're going to go to is WINS, right, and see what was there. And our notes from our meeting is 3 days of hell. So have those stuffs kind of in the back of your mind too. Is we don't. FY19 it was $500 million. That none of that has been awarded yet. FY20 there has not been any appropriations made in regards to that money, but it was an authorization for the next couple of years. So,
and I'll piggyback on that. As we're talking about, it doesn't exist. Develop your CIP as if the supplemental discretionary does not exist. Again, there's a whole bunch of applications that have been submitted for it, but again, that CIP, please don't like, oh, we want 500 million of that supplemental discretionary. We have to plan to use that CIP, those out. So it is very important, because that is the main question during CIP questions before we move on pretty quick. So we've talked about it quite a bit. The transfer program, it is very important to us. It saves us a lot of money. And to put into this. So honestly, this is our 2019 through 22 program. As you can see, there are 20 airports, actually probably 19 airports involved into this program. 19 times $150,000. I don't know what that is because I didn't add it together before. It's a big impact for us. Almost $3 million we are playing with this program. Saving that stays in Colorado, not the 11% of that $3 million. Huge deal for us. And so this is something we spend a lot of time on. I call it a shell game. Luckily, Linda's not here to yell at me because I call it a shell game, but that's really what it is. It's trying to find the best use of that money statewide. And so as we have that planned out, again, this is 19 through 22. Once this is set, we don't have the ability to make a whole lot of changes to it, because as you can see, moving one of those airports affects the other 19. It is a big deal for us, and honestly, we spend a lot of time developing these setups. And as you can see, that whole first group, we aligned $600,000 for runway projects for every one of those years in Group 1. So that's 19 through 22. We plan this way out. This is 23 through 26. We already have 16 airports involved in that, and we're already at 27 through 30. So this is why we are seeing that midterm and long term are really important for us to start finding where projects fit in, to save that money in Colorado, to not let that get back out and we get a certain percentage of 11%. So no one really knows what that looks like. This is our program. It works for the division, which is kind of a fun play. But this is what that looks like. Just a lot of people don't see that and honestly question how it works in the background. So I'm not really going to get into it anymore. Just wanted to give you a brief overview of what that looked like, and if there's any questions on the transfer program, honestly. Perfect. But there have been some changes to CDOT's program that I also wanted to talk about our grant program. So as of today, CIPs are open, so are applications for state and local money. Again, those first 2 years, we shouldn't see really any changes to them. So the airports that have projects for state money in their CIP, we should pretty much today. Some conversations will happen over the next few weeks to clean up those a little bit. But again, so as of today, grant applications for state and local are open. We need those submitted to us by November 22nd as well. Same as CIPs. The reason we have bumped up that date for state and local grant applications to be due, projects. We would present those to our aeronautical board in December so they could see everyone. We would go through project by project, showing them what every project statewide for state and local is, so our board gets a good understanding of honestly where their money is being spent. We are reinstating that, and then those state and local grants will be approved at the January board meeting in association with CAOA. So that was really what I wanted to talk about with this aspect, just to let you know that there are some changes, and that's the reason we need those state and local grant applications kind of as soon as possible. And now we jump into those key dates we talked about. You'll see today they are open CIP and CDOT grant applications. They're both due the 22nd of November, and then we actually will wait kind of until you get more information about how your federal grant is going to look. And so our applications will be due until the end of February for approval in April, at our April CAP meeting. So that's kind of the CDOT side of this, and then I'll let John talk about the FAA side of this.
Okay, one more time. Environmental documentation submitted January 15th. You know, honestly, grant applications can be done anytime between now and then too. Just work with your PM. We'll take them anytime. The caveat there is the application needs to be for at least or more what we give, or you need to ask for what we give you or more. Otherwise, we'll have to have you amend the application. Bids, we're looking for bids on construction and equipment projects April 1st. Negotiated fees for planning projects also, and then land acquisition, you know, I don't know offhand if we have any that I can think of right now. And then carryover deadline of July 1st. And again, that carryover deadline, even though we do a great job of minimizing the carryover with the transfers and everything else we do, we still want to protect that money for next year, and that's why we need to have it first, so that we can A, protect it for next year, and then B, if there are any expiring funds, that we can get those spent and used this year also. Yeah, get stuff in as soon as possible.
And talking about the FAA dates of the January 15th for the environmental, it may sound like the division really doesn't care. If you delay all of that, it delays us giving you the grant award for your federal match as well. We honestly, just 2 weeks ago, finally were able to get our last federal match grant out the door for signature. And it's honestly because of all those delays that all of these were pushed. So those deadlines affect our money as well, because as soon as we can, we always wait until the actual federal grant has been awarded, so we can match the exact amount of the federal award. So it does delay our process too. So those dates on the right side honestly really affect our program as well. We want to get money spent as quick as we can.
And we want, that's the one thing that we need to program is environmental.
And it's on every one of your sheets, so please take it home, highlight some dates, put it on your calendar. It will be a big deal this year. You guys are looking at it very heavily this year.
Yeah, like Mark said earlier, I mean, we have 23% of people hitting the goal. It's becoming more of a firm deadline, because that trickle down just impacts so many more people and so many other things that we need to alleviate that as soon as possible.
Okay. Cool. And then kind of that statewide shell game completed, and that's usually when you'll see an email come out from our office letting you know to log on and see what we changed in your CIP. So just a heads up, that's kind of our progression from now till January 20 is all our CIP and grant time periods. And then I'll kind of close it with a kind of what do we see the future of this workshop. So prior to today, I would have said that I really believe this workshop has kind of run its course. The division has got to a point where we're kind of back to a normal grant program. It appears there's still quite a few people that shows up for this. We want to kind of pare this down to just a 2-hour conversation about just finding out just kind of what's new and what's changed in the process. Is this still a valuable tool for you guys to come out here? So I'll take questions you have about the whole thing, and then also questions about the future of the workshop too. So.
think it's nice if when you guys send out the video too, like usually I'll forward that to my county administrator and the city administrator, so that if they have questions, because they don't always come down.
I think it's good, especially with turnover and administration. I think it's good, especially with the turnover and administration, just bring people in.
Well, if you did do the 2 hours, then you could extend the CDOT meeting. You got 6 hours of.
Yeah, one of the conversations that we've had between our two offices is, you know, paring this down or adjusting it, tailoring it, and then opening up some more time to have the one-on-one meetings also. Me being new to the state, I was surprised. I just wasn't planning on that for this time, and you know, we only have so much time, and so I think kind of allowing for that is something that we're looking for too, and so.
And we're looking to, around this time period as well in the future, to dedicate almost a week time period. Even the state got a little caught off guard with how many there were. I mean, I love talking to airports. It just caught us off guard this year. So that's all it was. But that's our plan forward, is to dedicate a week where we kind of just clear our schedules for you guys to come talk to us. Okay. And if we could start at the front of the room.